He's thinking about it. These are always the few seconds that get cut out when we edit it down. Right? It's the same with the end. Yeah. You forgot to close the live window. You forgot to close the Zoom window.
Where's the close button?
Right, yeah. Why? What's all this tapping? It's just me typing. All right, so it looks like we are live. And then I'll wait and see if we get up. There's somebody watching, so that's normally a good sign that we're at least active. If you're here, oh, single viewer, drop a comment, let me know. Oh, now we got 6. Okay, so I would say we are definitely live. So welcome, everybody. This is, I think, the penultimate episode of Freaky Fridays with James Corbin. I have, Slade says, hey, Tempest, we're getting people coming in already. Christina from Ireland, who I think has seen every last one of these, bless her heart. And I mean that in the actual bless your heart way, Christina, not in the Southern bless your heart way, which would be very, very rude of me. So we had a little bit of a schedule mix up. My guest was originally supposed to be the occult collector Calvin von Crush. But of course, we're all going through this phase 1 reopening stuff. Calvin is a tattoo artist by trade. And so there's been a lot of question as to whether or not tattooists can reopen. And long story short, we're going to push Calvin off to another Friday. He wasn't able to make it this time. All is well. He's doing fine. And we'll see him some other time. Thankfully, my friend Laura Tempest Zakroff, who I will never ever call Laura again. That's just weird to me. Tempest was kind enough to kind of be a designated hitter for us. And that's really exciting for me because I have long admired and respected Tempest's work sort of in the kind of more magical community. And we'll do a little distinction between magical and paranormal. So with that, Tempest, welcome. Thanks so much. You have a much brighter window than I do.
Thanks for having me. My studio is very small, so I painted it a very bright, warm green, yellowy green. So it always feels like it's a little bit sunny in here.
Mm-hmm. And I should
sunny in
say,
Providence. It's our own show.
Right. Whereas mine, I want this. The whole rest of my house is bright and sunny and painted lots of colors, and so I wanted my little study to be as dark and creepy as possible. With that in mind, I should say one goth to another. Happy World Goth Day.
Right. We're doing this. We're doing a thing of like maybe I should have gone in the darker, the ritual room with the red walls. But...
I'll just do the celebratory goth dance. That's it. That's the whole dance. Yeah. Oh no! Don't get me started on the magic balls of energy. All right. So let me get my notes here. And I'm getting a couple of messages, guys. I know for whatever reason, this is the exact same setup we've used time and time again. I know my screen is coming across as a little dark today. My wife, who is much smarter than I am, insists that it's because the sun has not quite set, so we're getting a little ambient daylight. Yet another reason to dislike the sun there. Now I feel like I've done my homage to Goth Day. So Tempest, my goodness, I'm going to start our talk here by dating us a little bit. And I apologize in advance. So the first time I ever heard about you was in Bloomington, Indiana. This would have had to have been pre-Katrina. So we're talking at least 15 years ago. And I'm thinking probably more like 17 years ago. And your name was kind of mentioned as the belly dancing guru that all of the sort of bohemian gals in Bloomington, Indiana really wanted to emulate and learn from. And so I remember there was a Tempest belly dance DVD that got played in my apartment pretty regularly. And so all the time I heard your name mentioned in dance circles. I mean, that's really, when you first crossed paths with me, you were a professional dancer, I think, more than anything else. Or at least that's what I knew you for. And then later on, I ran helped run a little goth night, speaking of World Goth Day, in Bloomington, where I had the privilege of meeting your husband, who was playing all sorts of great steampunk and really wild music. I remember he did a steampunk ball where his band kind of coordinated with the Ghost Project, which I think were out of Atlanta at the time, which was a blast. And so I've known him much longer, and shocked to find out that kind of as I followed, I was like, okay, he's gone out to the West Coast. Oh, he's got a noose or a band. Oh, he's got a dancer now. And wait, that looks like Tempest. Wait, that looks like he's marrying Tempest. And then suddenly, like, you were kind of back in my circle again. And so by that point, I think, I know dance is still a big part of your life. I know that kind of has segued into more artistic endeavors. In fact, I've got one little piece of your art with me right here. This is my Baba Yaga tarot card bag when I was doing readings at the shop. But now you're a published author. You're an editor for several different kind of pagan publications. You've got, and I'm going to get this wrong, is it 3 books under your belt now?
I think I'm working on number 7.
On number 7 shows you what I know. I've read 3. Right.
I'm like, I don't know. Depends how you classify them.
That's true. Right. Well, and then the big thing for 2020 is you just released an oracle deck that's nothing but your own art. And so certainly we're going to talk about the Liminal Spirits Oracle at some point. But I'd love to hear from you. How did you get from the one place to the other? Was it a natural progression, or I never thought as a carriage driver 15 years ago in the French Quarter that I would wind up being the host of any sort of webcast about paranormal spiritual activity. So I know they're all crooked paths we take, but sketch yours out for me if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, it just brings the truth that Bloomington is like the navel of the universe.
It really is.
Because it's like not only is there the belly dance and music connection and all that's going through there, but actually the first Pagan Leaders Summit happened there in 2001. That was actually the first time I've ever been to Bloomington, was for that. And
I think I was there in 2001. I might have just missed that one.
There weren't too many people our age there.
Sure.
I think I was the youngest attendee at the time.
Right.
And I don't even know if I was old enough to drink. So, I basically, I started out, getting onto formally the magical path as identifying as a witch as early as 17. That's why I found there's a name for this.
Right.
And, that's amazing. And it was the early days of the internet. So you're finding all these things in the IRC, Pagan Tea House, and, talking with all these people. There are other people who believe and do the same things. It's not just, the Time Life series, Mysteries of the Unknown. And,
I just want you to know, I have my whole collection of Mysteries of the Unknown within arm's reach right behind me. So I just pulled up Psychic Voyages randomly.
It's a great one. I think I got that out of the library a lot of times from age 9 to 14.
Exactly. Those were my jam when I was a kid.
Am I aligned to the north? Okay, relax my body. We're going to have outer body experience now. I mean, the things
I love even there you can hear the divergent interests, because I wanted to hear about, the Loch Ness Monster and, your typical ghosts. And then when I was a kid, the big paranormal phenomena that captured my imagination was spontaneous human combustion, which you don't hear about. Nobody talks about that anymore the way they talked about it in the Unsolved Mysteries, Time Life age. So either that phenomenon.
In Search of, with Leonard Nimoy.
Right.
In Oak Island. And things that still. Yeah, so I'm definitely that kind of geeky nerd as well. Growing up, and even a haunted house and such things like that. I was already a weird kid, and just kind of finding out there are other weird people out there. Going off to college, and while I went to the Rhode Island School of Design, I met someone else who at the time was working on Crescent Magazine, and that was sort of her junior senior project in illustration, and became a published magazine.
Right.
But she moved back home to California, and I was working with the magazine still with her, but I'm like, what am I going to do here? I need to find more people. And so I formed the first pagan society in New England, and for college age kids. And we started up with Brisby, and then you added Brown, and then they were like, we're college age, can we come too? And people were like, we're not in college, but can we come? You're just like, all right, everybody. And so then you just have a huge gathering of people, because there was nothing else like it. Mm-hmm. And so that was my main focus. but at the same time, that friend in California, I mean, she's in San Francisco, and she was at one of the mission parades where there was a bunch of belly dancers, this Fat Chance belly dance, like the very early days.
Right.
And she's like, you know, it was also, since it was the early days of the internet, they had like a couple photos online, you know, like a GeoCities website kind of thing. And I was like, look, that's amazing. I want to do things like that because I, you know, love, you know, all the different cultures from that area, and like just the idea of women being powerful as they dance. It was very exciting for me. So I did find belly dancing in New England. It wasn't tribal. It was just good old belly dance.
Right.
Amalgamation. And so dance became a kind of a major thing. And then I ended up moving to California. And the weird thing about going from New England, which is, you know, it's a very liberal place, but it's also very conservative. It's a strange mix, like culturally conservative.
We have the same thing here in New Orleans.
Yeah. He's like, we're very independent thinkers, but at the same time, oh, I don't know if you should be wearing that, you know, kind of thing. And so, you know, being out as a witch, you know, was kind of a very dangerous situation in many ways, you know, so we're like being early pioneers and doing the first pagan pride and things like that. And then you go to California where people are like, so what? I work with a Jew, a Hindu, an atheist, you know, a witch, or whatever, you know. Right. And so, like, the first pagan pride I went to in the Bay Area had the same amount of people as we had in Rhode Island. Like, you're swimming in magical practitioners, and we were like, who cares? You know, so it became sort of a less of a being a public thing about it, and also dance taking off. It was like, well, maybe I should focus more onto dance. And so that became I didn't want to also be the belly dancing witch.
Sure, fair enough, right.
You know, and I didn't get into it because of like, the goddess, you know, in the body. It's like, movement is sacred. It doesn't matter what gender you are. And there's many styles of dance all around the world. You know, folkloric dance has many different reasons and purposes. So it wasn't really totally like, and this is a fertility dance. Didn't hit my happy spot. And so, you know, going in more into mythical, you know, so bringing in my goth side. It's like, if I'm going to dance, I'm going to tell a story. And so why not bring in silent film? And why not bring in these concepts of like Medusa or avenging angels and, you know, all sorts of.
You do have a rather impressive collection of what I can only describe as Sarah Bernhardt headpieces, right, that you wear when you dance. And without blowing too much smoke at you, folks, if you've never seen any of Tempest's performances, they are literally all over the internet, and they're phenomenal. I mean, I can remember even 15, 16, 17 years ago, I think one of the things that really did sort of propel you to the front of that scene, or at the very least made kind of your layperson like me take notice, is that you really do dance as a sacred thing. That when you dance, your connection to spirit, the fact that you are dancing, not even just with your whole body. You know, as an actor, we talk about that. You want to act all the way past your eyes, right? Instead of like up to your neck or anything else. So you were always dancing with your whole body, but I would go so far as to say you're really dancing with your whole spirit. And it really does, because it becomes something sacred, something magical as a result. So even if you're not into the whole magic thing, folks, if you're just a fan of dance, look this stuff up. As a guy with two left feet, I live vicariously through a lot of these videos. So there's something else that I want to talk about real quick, because I know as we've been kind of advertising this over the week, we've been billing it sort of as a conversation with a witch. And at first I said, well, that kind of leaves me out, doesn't it? Because I feel like I'm a witch, but conversation between two witches didn't sound quite as nice or something. But neither of us would identify as Wiccan. And so I think as everybody has sort of been able to come out of the broom closet, we have this conflation now where often when people say witch, what you think is Wiccan, that you're following this specific religion. And that's one of the first things when I started reading your material that I was really drawn to, is that you really don't identify the word witch that way. And in fact, you define it very much in a way that that I would. I mean, under your definition, I get to be a witch and a voodooist at the same time. And you can be a witch and a Catholic at the same time, or a witch and you know, practice Judaism or Islam or whatever you like. That it's more a connection to that otherworldly side. I want to say to that liminal realm, but we'll get into liminality later. We won't drop that word just yet. So can you give us Tempest's working definition of what it means to be a witch?
Quick.
Yeah,
the elevator
right,
pitch.
Right, yeah, exactly, right, on the business card.
So, and I always like to say, it's like if you ask, you know, two witches, what does it mean to be a witch? You're going to get 6 answers.
Absolutely.
As well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see a witch as being a weaver of connecting the liminal threads to the connection with the other. And the other is spirit, it's deity, it's the world around you, it's multiple levels of existence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also being in tune with those finer connections. So it's spiritual, but it's definitely not, you don't have to tie it specifically to a religion. It doesn't have to be tied to specific deities, a god, a goddess, that sort of thing. And for me personally, and so the biggest difference between like witch and Wiccan, like Wicca has a whole system that evolved, you know, 1940s onward, based in ceremonial magic, you know, with Gerald Gardner and all that. There's a very specific structure and there's a very specific culture.
Well, there's a, I don't want to call it a, there's almost there's a theology to it. They believe, you know, in a god and a goddess, and they have their own defined, you know, and I don't want to say it's not as dogmatic as some of the more mainstream Western religions we think of that have had, you know, thousands of years to kind of get those deep set traditions in. But it is very much, which is why I've always said, yeah, no, I'm witchy, but I'm not Wiccan. Right. And so, you know, I was rereading Sigil Witchery this week, kind of in advance of our interview, and I forgot how many things, sort of on a magical level, you and I do have in common. So we kind of both identify as witches, but not Wiccans. We both identify as ecstatics, which I love. I think it's still, even now, I find in the pagan community, it's really rare to find an ecstatic. And so for again, elevator pitch, right? Ecstatic traditions came to me mostly through the Sufi tradition, which is the ecstatic branch of Islam, specifically through the poetry of Rumi, who's a 13th century Muslim poet, and some other guys. But the idea is that ecstatic practitioners seek a direct link or a direct communion with, for lack of a better word, God, deity. As opposed to kind of going through either the priests and priestesses or going through the very sort of ritualistic steps and processes, which is to say that some of that can still exist in ecstatic traditions, but for the most part, we're talking about, you know, people like whirling dervishes, and I mean, the fact that you're a dancer and you identify as an ecstatic clicks immediately, because of course, dance is one of those big ways that you just kind of lose yourself. And I do think maybe that's the root of real ecstatic tradition, is that notion that you are going to lose yourself in the divine at some point. You're going to enter that sort of almost trance state of communion. And then, you know, what insights and what revelations you take away from that, you sort of bring back to the real world, quote unquote, and get to sort of try to translate it with your working mind, as opposed to that just deeply intuitive sense. So that's what it means to me. Is there anything I left out?
I would say that the main thing that you get with that is that you see your body as the tool, right? Your body is your primary tool for magic. Whether you're using that for trance dancing or for drumming or for breathing, you're not necessarily escaping your body, but becoming even a deeper union with everything.
Right. When I say that you lose yourself, I mean mostly your ego sort of dissolves in that greater sort of overarching sense. Oh, hey, Tempest, I'm scanning the comments as we go, and Barbara Bassari said she just took your sigil workshop last night and is back for more.
Hi, Barbara.
Right. Barbara, we expect you to add your, everything you learned. There will be a quiz at the end. No, but let's talk about that briefly. So I know the other thing we talked about is that we are going to spend probably the second half of our time together making a sigil. And we'll get into, if you don't know what that means at all, folks, don't worry. We're going to explain everything. But basically, it is a symbol that we're going to kind of create on the fly ourselves with your input, everybody in the comments section. And then by the end of it, we will have effectively a magic spell or an intention in symbolic form that then you can kind of carry around with you to bring these energies about in your life. And I said there's the briefest elevator pitch of what sigil magic really is, and we're going to dig deep into it. But before we do, as always, we like to give y'all a little incentive to maybe drop something in the tip bucket. I didn't have an extra copy of Sigil Witchery here, and because this was a last-minute sort of schedule change, I didn't have time to grab one from Tempest to kind of auction it off. Yes, beautiful, just like that. But we decided that it's been a while since I've gotten to do something totally crazy and appropriately New Orleanian stuck in my house, so we're changing this. Already, I see bids already going out. Yeah, you might have seen it in the comments. If the tip jar can reach $200 by the end of the evening, then I have committed in front of all my business partners and some of our employees that whatever sigil we make tonight, I will get it tattooed on my person somewhere. Some of y'all may know, I know a lot of you don't get to see this very often, but that wouldn't be the first time something like that has happened. So I'm not too shy about that. However, we decided to go real big and say if the tip jar can get $500 in it, which would be the largest single day pull that we've had since we started doing these episodes, then whoever donates the most will get to decide where that sigil goes on my body. Not the face. I've been requested by both my business partners and my wife to keep this intact. But especially because my wife and my business partners and my mother, of all people, are all watching this live cast, I will say the face is off limits. The head we're going to leave on the table. So I'm not going to go the Post Malone route, but everything else is fair game. So as always, you can Venmo at No Secret Stores. That stuff's in the comment thread. I see people saying meaty forearm already. I don't have a real meaty forearm, but we'll see what we can do. Love it. So that's the silly thing we're doing tonight. I'm not sure if I'm rooting to get to 500 or not. I'm definitely of mixed minds. But that's the craziness that's going on. So to explain a little more about that, so fans of the show know the very, very, very first guest we had was Paul Knopfsinger, who's one of my dearest friends and is a magician out of Colorado. But we would say he is a magician with a C, as opposed to what you and I are going to do tonight with all our friends, which is magic with a K. And I know both, see, I can tell you and I are both inwardly suppressing our wince because this has long been kind of a topic of some consternation. But let's differentiate real quick. When we say magic with a C, we mean this kind of stuff that Paul and I can do. Prestidigitation, stage magic, everything else. Magic with a K is more ceremonial magic, ritual magic, witchy magic, all of that sort of spiritual stuff. Weigh in real briefly for me, Tempest. Magic with a J. Thumbs up or thumbs down? No. I don't know. Right? Again, I've got you at a disadvantage because I just read all your thoughts on this a couple days ago. But right.
Just sort of like magic is not my favorite word to describe. I think I like witchery, but even then, it's like there's so much baggage.
It is. There's a lot of
J's for, right? Extra baggage. I know it's cheese, but
I said it to you earlier when we were chatting online, but I said one will worker to another, and I think that's the most generic kind of catch-all phrase that I tend to use. And I'll be very honest, it's been quite some time since I've engaged in any sort of magic with a K that wasn't solitary. That was the very first witch book I ever picked up as that bright-eyed geek boy was Scott Cunningham's Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner. And of course, I think anybody that's our age that's into this had at least one Scott Cunningham book at one point or another. But I've been solitary most of my life. Only rarely do I get to collaborate with somebody. So this is a big treat for me to get to do any magic. And those of y'all that know me well, I mean, even some of my friends would say, yeah, this might be the only time you ever get to see inside this part of my life at all. I tend to keep my magical practices, very, very secret. And that's just me. My Mars is in Scorpio is how I dismiss it. But this is a change. So for a lay person, for someone that comes in that doesn't know what magic is, I guess that's how I would describe it. It's using rituals and a few principles, which we'll talk about, like sympathetic magic, to put an intention out in the universe and then have the universe sort of respond accordingly. And over, 25, 30 years of doing this, I've realized it never responds quite in the way that you think it's going to. As one of my mambos would tell me, you get to make the request. You don't get to decide how that request is fulfilled. And so, of course, we can get into, you really have to know what you're asking for. But I'd like to hear your definition of it, since the sigil magic we're doing, I mean, this is entirely your creation. You kind of came up with this method. There's a whole 200-page book that kind of digs into it and details it.
So I look at it as, there's all the definitions. Of course, if you've read all the books, then you get the magic of the art of changing consciousness with will. And I think about it as using thought, starting with thought as the initial place, to influence yourself, your environment, the world around you, and to be in communion with the universe, to have that conversation with the universe. And I think it's important to connect it to that power of the self, because as a society tells us you're not powerful. Magic is a silly thing. You can't influence that. And all I'll do is give you an example of stress. Great example right now.
Like, yeah, right. Perfect
what is
example.
Happening to us under stress? It's just thought, right? It doesn't. Oh wait, it's affecting your skin and it's affecting your digestive system and everything else, and your anxiety's increased. Oh, but it's just thought. What if you use that for something that actually benefits you rather than is a detriment to your health?
Mm-hmm. Well, and we say, that notion, as someone that suffers from anxiety, that idea that it's all in your head, that's like one of the worst things you can say to somebody like that, because number one, we know, but just that point, just because it's all in your head doesn't mean that it doesn't have a very real effect, not only on you, but sometimes on your environment, on your surroundings, on the decisions you might make, or the interpretations of an event you might go. So yeah, absolutely. I think the identification of that is super important. What differentiates it then between just sort of, I'm going to play the skeptic for a second and say, oh, so really all you're talking about is positive thinking, right? This is just psychology. You don't ever get to do that to a real skeptic. You have to be polite.
No, I probably use
you might,
colorful
right.
language and gestures as well.
Mm-hmm.
I just get hives.
Well, I think that the difference is that to believe in any of this, you have to start with the sort of assumption that there really is this really is a method of changing reality. And we'll dig into that a little bit. I don't think you can talk about magic for any extended period of time and not talk about the notion of consensus and consensual reality and co-creation. And obviously we can dig as deep as anybody would like. But this is also not, the other thing that I think really draws me to your work is that, okay, so that's magic. We're going to use these rituals and hand gestures and sort of step-by-step instructions to try to achieve some sort of intention out in the world. And so then my mythical skeptic says, oh, I've seen this on TV. So this is where you dress up in the big red robes, and everybody has to wear the eyes wide shut mask. And I think there's a book by Solomon that's involved, and Aleister Crowley's going to make an appearance. And but that is not at all sort of the magic that you do.
No, but the red robes do have pockets.
Do they have pockets?
They have pockets. So.
That makes them better, right?
And so does my hoodie. So that's what normally I can be doing anything in. Mm-hmm. So the low to high magic. Think about it in terms of computer programming, right? If you really want to do the work at the computer level and speak to the computer, it's going to be at the closest level possible to that language. Mm-hmm. To get to the end user, you have to go through a bunch of different languages to translate that. And so it's kind of up here, it's the furthest away. So you think about folkloric and earthworking kind of magic, really directly having impact on the universe around you versus asking somebody else to do it for you outside of yourself. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Like if you want to call in, spirits, ancestors, deities, saints, angels, demons, whatever that is, you can do that. But you are also, I say, the self-divine. You are part deity. So why not tap directly into that? And again, using your body, using your mind as the most immediate tools around you versus layering the power and funneling it through. It's like drinking from the river or redirecting through an aqueduct.
Right. Well, you say a great thing in Sigil Witchery where you use that same metaphor about the coding, and then you point out that low code, what we would translate into as low magic, is closer to the source code, and I thought that was a brilliant metaphor, that it's closer to the source, because and I don't want to kind of poo-poo Aleister Crowley or any sort of high magic at all. I think that there's very much a place for that, and I've had some experiences that would lead me to believe there's definitely some efficacy there. I mean, it works. The trouble is when you come to it as a newbie, a lot of it, because it is so complex, it is so technical, that it reads like stereo instructions. It's very dense. It's very hard to kind of parse what's being said. I know when we talk about sigils, we'll bring up Austin Osman Spare, and that's another great example. I love Spare's artwork. I have a book of his behind me here on this bookshelf, but I only really like his artwork. When I try to read his stuff, I fall asleep, and it's the same with a lot of these. And so that's what we would call high magic, ceremonial magic, etc. And I think probably what you and I do more often is what's termed low magic, or I even will sometimes say hedge magic. The sort of stereotypical kitchen witch, which I am aspiring. That's been my coronavirus planned activity, as I am sort of turning my kitchen into more of a witch's kitchen. So new spice rack and new dried herbs and all sorts of other things. But that's what I love about low magic, is really anybody can do it. You don't need 13 black candles that have been soaked in the light of the full moon. And I mean, you can do that if you want, but you say, if you got charcoal, a Post-it note, and 5 minutes, you can do magic. It's just not going to look the same. But I've always, I think, and this, I wonder if this is a function of our generation, coming out of that generation that did start with no internet access at all, and now look at us having this conversation kind of across the nation. I think as a result, we got exposed to a much broader array of systems and beliefs and things than maybe the previous generation did. And as a result, most of the people I know our age that are into this are kind of spiritual mutts. We borrow a little bit from a whole lot of different places and then kind of mix it all together and make it our own. But to me, I think that's the most personal magic there is. That it's that much, again, it's that much closer to this source instead of that source or whatever you want to say. And so one low magician to another, thank you for making that accessible, because I've always said, you don't need consecrated crystals and this and that and the other. That's all just kind of stage dressing. it helps. But at the end, it's just intent and a couple of tools and knowing what you're doing, and you're kind of off to the races. So with that in mind, I'm going to stop chattering on for a little bit, and I want to dig into sigil magic specifically, because that is what we're talking about. It's what we're going to do tonight. So I'll let you kind of take the mic and just tell us about sigils. Where did they come from? How far back do they go? What's the difference between a sigil and a symbol and everything else? So by all means, take it away.
All the things.
All the things, right.
All the things. So there are many methods of crafting sigils, and I think it's probably be helpful to what I define sigil as is any mark that is made, painted, drawn, etched, licked, however you make it through human means, and is believed to have magical properties. That is the basis. Like, that's everything can fall underneath that umbrella. And so that is something we have been doing since the beginning of time. Going back to those first cave paintings where you're putting the hand on the wall and there's different marks that are being made for, you've read the book, I don't like calling it hunting magic, because I don't think that's what it was. It's more a matter of like the purpose of art is translating our experience around us. It's the explaining the divine, it's keeping memory, and sharing what's going on. It's saying, oh, this is an important thing for us to remember for later on, and this is how things are done. And they've explained the dream realm and all of these different things. It starts that moment that we make a mark on the wall, and that mark stands for something bigger. And that's where symbols come in, right? It's a succinct way of expressing a larger idea. So a sigil is essentially condensed magic. It's a condensed spell. Anything that you can use it for traditional spell, candle spells and all sorts of herbal concoctions and potions and pretty much anything that involves the stuff, like they call it, the stuff, right?
Right.
The stuff is great. We love stuff. Stuff is very tactile and beautiful, but you can actually condense that all down into a very simple drawing that still encompasses all of that, because magic starts with thought. And starts with that visual part, that right side of our brain that starts to see what it is that we want, how we want to influence the world, what that job is going to look like, what that improved health is going to be, what the new love life, whatever it is that you want to manifest, it starts with visualizing it. And it's also, I think, the difference between prayer and magic in some ways. That self-oriented, here I'm going to be the source for changing this, versus asking somebody else to do it for you.
Right.
So there's that.
Right.
And with us, there's so many different sigil methods, especially in Western occultism, what most people know tends to be either some sort of ceremonial magic, which I like to call the Punnett squares. You have a little circle, you have a little square, and then you connect the little dots or the letters or whatever that is. Or you have one of Spare's methods, and I'll describe it before I go deeper into that, is the idea that you take the sentence, right? You have the statement, the I statement, I will, this thing shall happen, and then you cut out generally the vowels and the duplicate consonants, and you scramble it up and you put it on a piece of paper and you either set it on fire or masturbate to it or whatever it is.
Right. However you want to charge it up, right?
Yeah, charge it up, right? And send it off into the world, which, that's not necessarily, let's just say, one of his methods. It's not what he was doing for most of his artwork when you look at those things. I see a deeper connection with what's happening in his art, in my own work, that I recognize that process. But also in the Book of Pleasure, there is a little footnote that he says that this method is for his friends who want a method for everything. So he came up with it as sort of a kind of like, I'm a right brain person. I'm trying to explain art to you. You're not getting art. Here's a left brain method.
Yeah. Here's paint by number. Go nuts. Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so many people I've talked to, once they, find out about my method and they're artists, they're like, oh, thank God, because it feels like it's basically scrambling up your brain. If you look at any sympathetic magic spell, like even a candle spell, right? You choose for that prosperity, that you choose the green candle and you use those herbs and you're seeing all of that build into it, you don't like bury the candle. You light the candle, you let it do its thing. And so if you scramble up the idea, you're kind of messing up the vision in some ways. So if you are a very visual person, it becomes a hampering versus helping you get to that end result. For people who have harder time visualizing, I think it's a really good method for those folks because they're not that visually oriented. And there's many different kinds of brains, right? Brains think in different ways. So there's not, one method that's going to be the only one for everybody. We have many different kinds of ways of our neural pathways. So which one works for you is going to be the best one.
But I love this idea of symbols being such a powerful magical tool that can be used. And anybody that doesn't understand that, I'm going to joke, kind of isn't looking around their own world, because I mean, they're really everywhere. If we were having this conversation and suddenly the screen flashed up a red octagon, it would probably make us shut up for a second or two while we figured out, wait, why are we being told stop? And the fact of the matter is nobody told us stop. We just know red octagons mean stop. And so now just the presence of one will cause you to do that. My favorite one, and I wish there's no way for me to show people because it's on my computer. But I love that about half of us now have a bitten apple on our screen. Yeah, exactly. And when you think about the sort of mythic connotations of an apple with a bite taken out of it, I mean, that is original sin. That's the Garden of Eden. And yet we see it every day, and it just crosses our eyes without us even thinking about it. And so, the obvious analogy is advertising. Advertising agencies are doing sigil magic on you all the time, whether you really know it or not. And so this is just taking those same methods. And again, I think internally, whether you want to ascribe this as all psychology or has this spiritual aspect to it, I think is a matter of how your brain works. For me, it's very spiritual, even though I am very much a think, kind of overthinking kind of guy. But I love just the immediacy of these sigils, just the straight impact. Now, that brings me to another good question about them, which is, when I was taught sigil magic originally, I was taught this method we're talking about, the Austin Osman spare, eliminate the vowels, push all the letters together and make some cool picture. But I was also told that as soon as you have finished the sigil, as soon as you finish creating it, your next job is to totally forget about it entirely. That ideally you are supposed to draw this sigil for a specific intent and then forget both the intent and the sigil's meaning, and that's supposed to help the magic. Now my understanding is you don't necessarily buy into that. No, good.
I don't think Spare did either.
I never understood it either.
Like, here's all of Spare's artwork with sigils in it. It's not been destroyed. It's still around. So the paragraph in question, though, so the Book of Pleasure, he wrote in his early 20s. And I have come to the belief, now in my 40s, that things that I wrote in my 20s should, I'm glad that the book I was going to write in my 20s, died in a horrible hard drive failure that, also fried the motherboard, because thank God the world has not had 20s, 26-year-old Tempest. Here's my book on witchcraft.
Right, baby Tempest, right?
Thanks, all the blessings, all the gods. Thank you.
Right.
So he's at that point. In your 20s, you know everything. Right, you're an asshole, so that comes into play there, and you're trying to impress the people around you, and so there's this sort of, I call it the Blavatsky method. It's like, you're getting paid by the word, you might as well put as many words as you can in there. So all of those things sort of combine into that, and there's a paragraph in there where he's basically, what he is trying to get at and saying is that don't fixate on what you do, don't fixate on your magic.
Right, don't
that
obsess.
Doesn't mean, don't forget it. So what I give an example for people to think about is, if a candle spell, you do a candle spell for that job, you go work on your resume, right? You do the thing, you just go about your business. You're not necessarily forgetting about it, but you just have set things in motion. Now, a person who fixates burns the candle, and like 5 minutes after it's done, going, I don't have a phone call yet. Where's the job?
Right.
Maybe I should burn like 6 more candles. And so they just get into this thing of like it's in the ritual. Like it's not in the ritual. It's not in the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get off your butt and write the resume and put the things out there and decide what it is you want in the world, not just think about I gotta do a spell. I gotta do a spell. I got to ask other people for permission to do stuff.
Well, and this might sound too much like The Secret, but I also find that there's a self-fulfilling prophecy in there, because if you're focused so much on the result and then you expect that it's going to happen in 24 hours comes and goes, and you think, oh, it's not working, I should do it again. So you do it again, you go, oh, it's not working. Oh, it's not. And all you're saying over and over again is this isn't working. I mean, you are reinforcing the negative of what you really want to accomplish. And so there's definitely something to be said for that. The one part about the forgetful method that I always did like is the idea that other people can put energy into a sigil that you've created without knowing sort of what they're putting energy into. And so the idea is that then if you take a sigil that you know the meaning of and you display it somewhere prominently, the idea is that anybody that walks by and gives it a thought is contributing energy toward that effect, whether they know what its intent is or not. And I think it's useful. I wouldn't want a sigil to have a little museum plaque next to it that explained exactly what I was intending, because then as soon as someone reads that, they bring their own biases and prejudices and thoughts into it, and that may not be what I was intending. And so you can hear, again, very much a solitary practitioner most of the time. But again, I credit this to you. I've watched over maybe the last year, maybe 18 months, as you've done these workshops at different conventions and the one last night, and you've crafted these communal sigils. You did one, I don't know, not too long ago. I mean, it had to be within the last year, that was designed for sort of protection and justice for all of the people kind of crossing at the border that had been put in the camps and everything else, and to see something that important kind of boiled down to this little symbol that you could put, on the back of your phone or whatever you like. That was a really impactful moment for me, and so I think it really is this very accessible way of being very effective. There's a comment, I know you can't see our comment thread, where someone said they started out in the Gardnerian tradition, and what we're talking about feels very liberating to them. There's an openness to the mystery of being, that it's so accessible. And I do think that's maybe why I kind of have the same philosophy as you, is I do feel like magic should be accessible to everyone. It's literally our birthright as humans, right? Like we were gifted with this imagination. This is really the most effective way to use it. So everybody should be able to. And those sort of stereo instruction, Crawley, Libra 33, and all the rest of them, they get a little complicated for me.
Well, I think too is that people get so hung up into, I got to fill out things. It's just very often from the Abrahamic background, right? Mm-hmm. That here's the book that tells me everything I'm supposed to do. And what we're talking about is a more organic, intuitive type of witchcraft and magic. There's no book. There's no one book. You have to trust you. And that's the hardest thing. It's like, sure, you can get caught up in all the fancy stuff of the tools and the robes and such and how words are pronounced in this, but or if you just put your hands in the dirt and trust and see and connect with the things around you and just shut up your brain for a moment of all the other stuff. That's the most amazing experience, but it's the most difficult in some ways. Like it's like this should be accessible for everybody. But because we've installed all these blockades to tapping into that, it can be really hard. Right. Well, and it can't be that easy.
There's a lot of pride and I think a lot of ego involved in doing that too, because you have to start as a beginner. And so, if you asked me draw a sigil right now, it would look like a finger painting because that's the limit of my artistic ability. You have to practice and work at it. But also that finger painting should be as effective as anything else, provided you're in that right headspace. And I think that's the accessibility that I love about low magic in general and sigil magic specifically, is that really all you need is a writing utensil, something to write on, and your imagination, and that's it. So I know you're more sort of used to this than I am. We've got a few dozen people on, and I know some of them, I'm looking, have taken your workshop before, so they probably know more about this process than I do. But we definitely want to get one started. So I know enough to say I'm going to let you obviously take the lead and sort of walk us through this. But this is very much, I want to emphasize, this is a communal activity. We're throwing the doors open for everybody that is watching to pipe up. And so if you want to chime in, if you want to ask questions, if you have a really good idea you want to see included, that's why we're doing this. That's what it's here for. So with that in mind, again, I'm going to yield to you, Tempest, and kind of let you take over and tell us what we're doing next and how we go about making a sigil.
All right. So we'll explain a bit about the process, and then we shall craft one together.
Hands-on, right?
So I want for y'all watching right now, start thinking about what might be an idea that we can focus on. And so the method I have developed, the sigil witchery method, is an intuitive practice and a very personal method that pulls upon your own background, your own experiences, your own symbolic language, which can be anything from computer programming language to musical nomenclature, to astrology, to runes, whatever you use, right, that you're already familiar with, that's part of your background. So you can be any kind of magical practitioner, any kind of person to do this, and you don't have to be an artist. So keep that in mind. What we come up with, you might come up with other solutions. But the method I have is 4 steps, and only 3 of them are necessary. So everyone who's a slacker just went like, yay!
Right, yeah. Just learn the first 3.
And the first one is rule number 1 for all magic, which is, what is it that you want to do? Like, you should have a reason for why you're doing something.
Right.
So what's your problem? What's your damage? What are you trying to solve? What's going on? And figuring out what's your goal. Right. So some with the workshops I've been doing for the last month, half, 2 months, I have no idea. What is time?
Yeah, right. That's a flat circle is what I hear.
I don't know what day it is. So the last 2.5 months or so, I guess. Wow. They've all been kind of focused in some aspect of the pandemic. So, it started off the immunity booster sigils one I created, just, woke up one morning going, this is going to be a big thing. We need to start focusing as a community of how to think about health for everyone. And that's what it's about. It's about boosting that awareness and protecting people's health. But past that, we've got into the needs met, which is making sure that people's needs are met, in all the different ways, whether that's financially, whether that's health, etc. We had, there was the psychopomp one, that was one of the more recent ones, because that was when we were really starting to realize the amount of death, like how many people are dying. And the fact that so many people have to die basically alone, like you can't be there physically with your loved ones as they cross over. And not only for people who are from the virus, but people who are just dying natural causes, right, and for other reasons, are all getting lumped into this. It's not just this one thing. So we created that to help the crossing over experience and for people who are here to deal with that. There was one for the people who are in a vulnerable situation, like sheltering in place with an abusive person who is either your roommate, your partner, a parent, whatever.
Right.
I can't even imagine, I was in a very toxic relationship for 15 years, and thank God not there now. Like, it's just like, wow, I can't imagine surviving through that. And so much empathy and concern for those folks.
Right.
So there's like a few examples of like things that we're dealing with, different aspects of how we're being affected as a community. But as you mentioned earlier, the border crossing one is one we did. We did the one for protesters and those being unfairly detained by ICE. The burnout sigil for people experiencing media burnout, caregiver burnout, all of that. So you can have these big concepts, or you can have very small personal ones, such as, you need a little healing spell, a calming spell, you need a new apartment, what is it that you need to do? It has the whole spectrum. So,
but I like your advice. There's a piece of advice I want to focus on, that is, the old adage is be careful what you wish for. But here it is very much a make sure that you're asking for what you really want and not for a very specific outcome. So for instance, when you did the one for justice for these people at the border, it was not about well, we want revenge to be visited on these people, or even that we want ICE to be abolished. Whether or not you think that would be a good thing, it wasn't that so much as we want these people to have justice. We want them to be treated fairly, and that's not. I always feel like maybe from an outside perspective that feels like you're hedging your bets. Like, oh, if you're real vague, then anything that happens that way, that must be your spell going off. And really, it's the opposite. It's that being so focused on a specific outcome can blind you to not only all of the other roads that you might have taken, but even what the consequences of this particular action really are.
Right.
Right. We talk about this as voodooists all the time. One of my mambos said, you ask the loa, the spirits, you ask the spirits for what you want. They determine how they make it happen. And you're not allowed to pick their method. Just you can ask for the outcome. And it does make you much more, it gives you this sort of moral imperative to really be conscientious. Because if you just tell a spirit, or if you say a sigil, I want this person out of my life. Well, then, maybe they win the lottery and they move to Paris and you never see them again. And that doesn't seem very fair, but they're out of your life. That, outcome achieved. Or maybe the spirits send the bus and there you go. No more X, problem solved. And you have to be prepared that any of those ways might be the road that's taken, and you don't really have a lot of control over that. Now, I would say, I think maybe in the way that I've seen you craft sigils, you can put almost sort of secondary meanings in there. So you could say, for instance, I want justice, but I'd like justice and also a lack of violence, or maybe a presence of peace, or something like that. But it really to evaluate that intent, that deep heart intent, rather than just what we think would be the best thing for us. Like I said, I did not think a global pandemic would be the best thing for me at all, and yet I've gotten to interview all these cool people. Yeah, here we are, right? And so there are good things, even the bad stuff. So that's step one, right? Be very clear with what you want.
Step one is figuring out what it is that you want. Step two is the brainstorming. And that's where we get from that 1 into 2 is the magic follows the path of least resistance.
What a good way of saying that. Yeah.
That's like, and people are like, oh, is that a new concept? Like, no, look at thousands of years of folklore. Going from the classic genie or Jinn story to Baba Yaga to Coyote to Anansi, all of these, all of these things, right? And like Baba Yaga, nature itself. Nature, if you ask something of nature, nature's going to give it to you. It doesn't, have other opinions and morals put in it. It's just like, this is what you asked for. There you go. And that's the thing, like with most people figure out step one and they go, oh yeah, job, green candle, money. It's like, and you get a job, but then you get a job you hate. Right.
Yeah. Got to be more specific. Right.
Be more specific. So there's a balance between don't be too specific, which is like, I have to have this job. And I would like a job with these parameters. I would like to make this much money. I want to work this much in this field. I want respect. I want this. I want that.
Right.
You put this into the brainstorming list. And this is where you really start to visualize and start to see that position, or at least figure out what is it that you want, or what is it that you need. Getting a little song right there in my head. But so brainstorming, and it doesn't seem very magical, but it is the essence of magic right there. It's like if you want a house, where is that house going to be located? How much is it going to be? How quickly do you need it? Versus fixating on this house, this place, this here. So 2, not entirely difficult, but it takes some time to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And some people just want that instant, when I light a candle, be done with it. Like, well, you're going to get that shitty ass job. So
Right, exactly. Well, and it's sort of you get out what you put in, right? So if you just put in the bare minimum of effort and energy and just sort of slapdashed it together, that's the outcome you're going to get. It's going to be kind of slapped together and probably not be exactly what you wanted, etc. We talk about that in tarot card reading a lot of the time. You know, when I say, my favorite adage here, if you come to the cards, I work a lot with Brian Froud's Fairies Oracle, so an Oracle deck instead. But if you come to the spirits and you go, spirits, question mark, what they're going to do is go, human, exclamation point, and that's as much answer as you'll get, because that's as much question as you gave them. Right, so specificity, yeah, definitely. So I don't mean to interrupt. Go on. I'm watching. We're already brainstorming down here in the comment thread. But okay. Let's go with step 3.
All right, and step 3 is design. So this is the design moment, where what you're going to do is take that brainstorm list, and you're going to consider what marks or symbols coordinate with that. So if you're looking at something financially, then you might put in, okay, I want to get, 80K. 80K could be the thing. Or you're looking in a particular neighborhood, and that neighborhood is like a little maple leaf, or, near a lake, right. That sort of thing. Upward mobility can be an upward arrow. Something to do with the heart, compassion, it can be a heart. So whatever that symbols that you like to use, it's kind of like break down in, like, there's 50 pages of sigil witchery that's just all symbols and marks. And
I was going to bring it up myself, because for somebody that's not as visual of a person like I am, that was a brilliant 50 pages, because I could think heart for love and dollar sign for money, things like that. But, you get into chevrons and, upside down triangles versus right side up triangles, all sorts. And it's just invaluable for people that don't have that kind of knowledge of symbolism and semiotics and everything else.
Yeah, and then you start to see it, and you start paying attention to these things and go, then you realize the apple. Then you look at the golden arches, like all of these things, you start to see the symbols. So if you don't have a design background, you start to get a little into that. And and whatever you associate, when you look at that and you go, I feel like that's a circle. Like, but what does a circle mean? That doesn't matter. Like, if you look at something and go, I feel like the circle is the most important thing for this word, then you're right. So you need to trust your intuition. And some people like, so one of my favorite examples is discussing, the hashtag, right? The pound sign.
Right. I would say pound sign still, right?
Right. And that you can go back into the cave paintings. It's one of the original 32 signs. Genevieve von Petzinger, her first signs book, and the TED Talk 32 signs. It's one of those things that you see these hashtags, like the cross hatching, everywhere. And it's actually, I think it's one of the 7 entopic symbols as well that we see behind our eyes.
It might be. Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm trying to think what all those are. I know some of them, but not all of them, right? So
let's see. Yes, and yes, crosshatches. Dots, half circles, spirals, zigzags, parallel lines, wavy lines, and grids are crosshatches.
So like these are, I've not heard that. What's the word that's used to describe all of them again? Entopic, is that? Entopic. So that means basically if I close my eyes, the things that I can see, quote unquote, kind of floating in the blackness, those symbols, for whatever reason, seem to kind of appear more often or universally kind of across the human experience.
Yes.
Right. And so...
it comes from the Greek words for within vision. That's one of Davis Lewis Williams' explorations. And connecting it to the cave paintings, and perhaps that those were trance visions or dreams, and that they trying to explain that into that. But like, no matter where you go around the world, you'll see that in art.
Right. Well, and here's where my paranormal geek kind of shines for a second. So we keep referencing these cave paintings. So specifically, we're talking about the caves in Lascaux, France, which are some of the oldest, if not the oldest, cave paintings that they've discovered. Specifically, if you've ever seen it, it's a whole bunch of handprints on one wall, and then there's this whole buffalo scene where they're hunting bison or some other sort of 4-legged animal. There's some anthropomorphic folks, what they call therianthropes, so mostly man, but with an animal head of some kind. So think the old Egyptian gods. And then there are all these symbols that are just there. And so for a long time, they've thrown out, well, maybe it's proto-language, like the origins of writing. Maybe it was just people doing silly graffiti on the walls. The academics are going to say, oh, this is narrative. It's almost historic. You're seeing a hunt play out, right? Step by step by step. And I have a couple of problems as a paranormal guy with that last theory. Because number one, if they are giving you a history, you have to explain the, deer-headed guys that are running around with them. So we clearly have some, mythological figures that are involved. But also, most of these cave paintings are not accessible. You have to go so far back into these cave systems, and then in some cases you had to climb a cliff face to get to this little nook, and then inside the nook is where all the art actually is. And so everything we talk about, it speaks to there being a deeper meaning to it, that there's some sort of, whether it was shamanic or religious or spiritual or magical or what, but this idea that you had to go deep into a cave and then go through these sort of trials and ordeals, even if it's just reaching this place, before you could do what? Trace the outline of your hand on a wall? I mean, it had to have had a deeper meaning. So yeah, look it up. Lascaux in France if you want to see images of what we're talking about, or there's a couple of relevant images in Sigil Witchery itself if you pick that up. So anyway, sorry, that's one of I could talk about those therianthropes for a long time. We'll get to liminality. I have not forgotten the word yet. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Back to you. Right? So we've got our 3 steps. All right.
Great. So we do design, and then the design process is you put together these marks, right? You can use that list here, or what tends to happen when I'm doing it for myself is that all of this is happening in my head. So I'm thinking about these images, but that is, 4 decades of making art. So this process that is in the book is the reverse engineering of what I've learned how to do over many decades.
Right.
So you can take a look at that list, and it's very easy visual representation, especially if you're new to working with art images. You put them together, and in the process, right, it's a bit of a design process. So I tell folks to draw with pen, to not erase, because you're going to see a buildup. Like as you're like, oh, I don't know, this looks dumb, this looks like this, right? If you erase it, you don't get to see the whole image build up. I was going to grab my notebook, but I realized it's in the scanner. But when you look at that, you start to see it, and you find one that goes, and your brain clicks in and goes, this is the thing. This is the image. And at that point, you can just close your notebook and call it a day and not do a damn thing. Mm-hmm. Because what has happened is you've already gone through the process of figuring out what is it that you want to accomplish, what are the parameters for this, and then you've basically pressed enter. The moment your brain recognizes it as, this is a good shape, that's it. So people are like, well, how do you charge it? Like, you just did, like the whole
process of making it, right?
The drawing process, the thinking process, this is your essence going into the paper. And there is also something kinetic that happens in between your eye and your brain and your hand and the paper when you are creating the sigil as well.
Right.
So you don't have to set it on fire. You don't have to masturbate to it. You don't have to, you could. I'm not saying you can't do those things.
I'm getting this one. I think I'm getting this one tattooed. And last I checked, my tattooist frowns on that. So, yeah, no. But yeah, I love it. I love when you talk about just the act of, if it's something simple, just drawing it in the air with your finger over and over and over again, right? It's almost a form of moving meditation where you're focused on that imagery and you're focused on the meaning, and eventually it just becomes automatic when you're doing it. And I think honestly now you're starting to get into those, super secret ceremonial hand gestures, and that all came back from these same concepts. I also like that you say it doesn't have to be art. That it's a lot of what we're talking about is this notion of imagery, but you talk about baking it into cookies or drawing it in black marker on the back of a black chair so that nobody can see it if you want to kind of keep it secret. And I love all these different kind of methods that there's not, again, the draw of it to me is that it very much is not a one size fits all. It's a, here's this toolkit, now figure out how it personalizes to you, and that's your system. You're done, you're good. So again, I've said it a few times. If you've not picked up Sigil Witchery, we're going to have the links for you in the comments so that you can order it direct from Tempest. Since we, like to support authors and not Amazon. So I've got 3 or 4. As we've been talking, I've been kind of keeping everyone's suggestions charted down. By all means, y'all, I see maybe 15 or 20 of you that haven't piped up. So if you've got anything you want to throw into our sigil, by all means, please speak up. You want to hear what we've got so far?
Oh, let's finish with step 4.
Oh, step 4. That's right. The unnecessary, or not necessary, but important to remember step 4.
So you kind of mentioned them a little bit, but I just want to make it for people to understand that step 4 is if you want to do something with it. So because we are human beings and we love a tactile physical experience, we love ritual, we love the stuff, right? And so that's if you want to bake it into cookies or carve it in a candle or put it in a bar of soap or tattoo it, that you bless your windows with it, that you dance it, that you draw it with incense, right? All of these things, this is to apply and or acknowledge your sigil. In the shared magic sigils, part of that is getting that image up that's high res that people can use, and they also can read exactly what it's about and help build into that energy to protect people, to connect with the other side, whatever the purpose is. So apply and acknowledge, and that's what I said. You can just close your notebook. It's just for you. Let it be. You don't have to do anything else. But if you're like, I'm gonna put this in the cookies and I'm gonna eat this. I'm going to make somebody a cheese sandwich with the binding spell. Whatever it is that you're going to do, you can do that in step 4.
I've got a great example of this. I'm going to step away real quick, but I just want to grab something and then bring it back. So again, people don't usually get to see this sort of thing, but I'm actually working on something that's related as we speak. So I'm going to hold this up, and I apologize in advance. You're not going to get a lot of explanation as to what it is, because again, it's a super secret thing. But I can hold up this deer jawbone, and you can see there's all sorts of sigils and symbols all over it. This is as close to artistic as I get. Those are actually burned into the bone, which takes a soldering iron at a very, very hot temperature. So hot, in fact, that I broke my first soldering iron. It got too hot and fell apart. But I'm doing this as a sort of project for a small group of people. And again, I never would have thought like a soldering iron plus jawbone is an effective medium, and yet here we are. Also, just an update, since we're here at 9:15. The person in charge of the Venmo just let me know we are at 265. So I'm getting inked one way or another, and we haven't even started putting this together. That's both exciting and slightly alarming at the same time. But that means we're 235 away from, I'm going to guess, my friend, was it Jeff that said this? I'm sure it was. Yeah. My friend Jeff is aiming, I think, to be the top dog. So he gets to decide where it goes. But if somebody wants to outbid him, I would be fine with that too. So yeah, again, the personalization to it, it sings to me. And there's a couple of you that might know what this is about, but you guys have to keep your mouth shut too. No spoiling it in the comment thread. Anyway. So yeah, so once it's created, then, what do we do with it? Do we just put it up on a wall somewhere, or tape it to the back of my cell phone, or what?
It depends on what your goal is. So you can use this method for a devotional connection or a spiritual connection. So if you're working with a particular deity or spirit, you can use that and come up with your own, basically your phone number. for working with that. And so when you are working with that deity or spirit, you might use that, or even an ancestor, right, to connect with them, and that's made in that moment. If it's something for helping you to sleep, you might put it on an eye pillow, lavender eye pillow, or by your bed frame. If it's something about eating healthy, maybe you're going to put it on your refrigerator when you open the door and put it in there. If it's for some sort of fertility, I guess it depends what kind of fertility you want.
I hope we're not getting a fertility tattoo inked on me. That's right.
No.
My wife might have veto power on that one.
Like, nope. Like, sure, prosperity kind of fertility. So like, if you're going to do a protection spell, washing with a bar of soap that has that protection, and maybe that bar of soap also has patchouli or some other thing that you consider as a cleansing or protection. I mean, it depends on the tradition, right?
Right.
So you put that on there and you wash with that, or you can anoint yourself with oil, so it can be totally invisible as well. Like I said, to draw it, to dance it, to do things with blessed water. So it's just a matter of applying it. That's why the step 4 is that one more little extra kick that your right brain needs, or feels like it wants, so that you feel like I've put this out into the world and I made it either part of myself or I've added it to the environment. I've protected something. I protected my chair so nobody can steal it, kind of thing.
And I think that is where, when Spare and Chaos Magicians and everybody else talk about the deliberate forgetting of the sigil, I really do think that's what they're aiming for. They're just doing it in a more sort of intellectual, kind of esoteric way, is that eventually it's not that I'm going to see this sigil on my fridge for eating healthy and think, oh, right, that's my eating healthy sigil. Maybe I'll have a salad instead of potato. Like that cognitive sort of process will be there at first. And that's one of the reasons you put it in a place that's associative. But eventually it just becomes automatic. It becomes like that red octagon where we see it, we think stop. So you might not even notice that your eyes pass over it on the fridge, and suddenly you feel like having a salad instead of that bag of potato chips. And that's magic. That's how it works. We've rewritten your reality that way. And I think at the end of the day, that's all that forgetting the sigil ever really meant, is reaching that moment of automatic.
Yes.
You're right.
Because you also think about, our brains are only showing us a portion of what we're seeing at any given time as well. And think about, it's also how advertising works. Like the time that you finally recognize an ad, it's probably the 9th time you've seen it before you start to think, do I need this product? Boy, I might need a power washer. Thanks, Facebook.
Right. I see you've been listening to my conversations again, but you're right. I do need this. Right. Oh, Lordy.
Scroll. Oh, look, another power washer. Scroll. Oh, something from wish.com. No.
My dream is, this is something I'll pass on to you. I'd like Facebook at some point to recommend my own book back to me. Like that would be, I will have reached peak self-referential advertising at that point. Yeah. And I'll probably wind up buying it because I'm an idiot and attached to Facebook. So
it's like a good book. I feel like I should read it.
Yeah, right? It was on Wish. It was $1. What was I supposed to do? All right. So where do we go from here, Madam Tempest?
Shall we make a sigil?
Let's do it. So you've got some really cool tech that we'll get to, I think, in a minute. Okay. But right now, let's go through the steps. So step 1, we're just going to do ideas, and we certainly have a lot of them over here in the comment thread. So far, what I've heard is Marina was hoping for motivation. Someone else suggested sort of focus and mental well-being, and then Marina said, maybe if I had focus, I would have motivation. So it seems like all 3 of those are sort of kind of tied together. Barbara, who was at your workshop yesterday, said she'd love to craft a sigil for widespread acceptance of lifestyle differences, which certainly as 2 people out of the broom closet, we're all about that. And then down the line, I'm going to answer this for myself, but Genevieve said that her fella, Jeff, of the encouraging everyone to get me inked, says he wants prosperity for New Orleans, if that's a thing. And I know that I've seen you do enough work that I can go, of course that's a thing. Absolutely, we can do prosperity for New Orleans. We can do prosperity for the Gulf Coast region. I mean, it really is whatever these ideas are. We've also got one wanting to kind of get out of ruts and sort of a release from stuckness. And then I see, oh, now here they come in fast and furious. Getting out of ruts and a release from stuckness, a cheerful heart. Christina Morales says mental well-being for her too. And I'm all about, since it's going on me, I'm all about mental well-being. So we can definitely kind of star that one. Anybody else want to chime in? So we're hearing a lot, as you know, this is unsurprising to me, but how interesting in a time of self-quarantine and global pandemics and who knows what else, that a lot of us are focused on our mental health. And it's sort of our, right, getting out of these feelings of being stuck. So what's the, I'm thinking of Brian Froud again. Nalis the alchemist, who unsticks everything, right? When things are stuck, she comes along and unsticks them. And so I think that's what's going on. Misha Adams, who's another, longtime listener here, says she would like to deconstruct mind-body dualism because it's hurting us so badly. And boy, Misha, that's spoken like a magician right there. Mind-body dualism. Can I just speak for all of us magical people and say that there is no difference really, y'all? It's the same. Your mind and your body are part of one system. Don't think that there's something separate. We've got a lot of, there's one for compassion. I'm grateful that I'm not seeing any fertility. That's good for me. Anybody else pop it in? So yeah, my notes, what I've got, motivation, focus, mental well-being, acceptance, prosperity for New Orleans, getting out of being stuck, and compassion is what's on our short list right now.
Well, I feel like we can probably collect most of those under like mental well-being.
Mm-hmm. I think certainly motivation and focus fall into that. I think getting out of being stuck comes into that. I might want to, let's see. So if we say mental well-being, and let's put that compassion in there. And then I think, and I have the luxury of sort of knowing your method and having an idea of where we're going for this. Hold on. Genevieve just said, why not fertility, James? Some of us want babies. And that's true. But as far as I know, only one of us is getting it tattooed. So we're going to go with the not fertility. And then Leslie Rogers said, embrace this huge transition we are going through, which certainly, I think, again, comes back to that mental well-being. But I think there is something to be said on a larger scale for using this pause, using this pandemic as a time of transformation. We are all kind of cocooning, through being forced, just through these stay-at-home orders. And so I'm looking forward to seeing who everybody decides to be kind of on the other side of these 70, 80, 90 days. Certainly I've gotten more witchy in the last 2.5 months than I would have otherwise, because I didn't have the outside world kind of constantly demanding my attention. So it's let me focus a little more internal. And I think maybe the wisest thing I've said to my wife in the last 3 months is I said, look, this is going to underline for us what we think is really important. Because whatever we've been focused on in the last 2 months is what's important to us. And so I just said, if nothing else, use this time to figure out what that is and then stay focused on that, even past the pandemic. Genevieve would like resilience. To me, I can fold that one into the prosperity for NOLA, believe it or not, because if we are one thing as a city, resilient is probably a good word for it. I'm proud to say we got an A- for stay-at-home orders, but it's just because we're so used to having to do this 1 week at a time for hurricanes that just wound up being a 2-month-long stay-at-home for the hurricane season. So I'm seeing Tempest, mental well-being, compassion, maybe a NOLA touch to it. And then you tell me when that's all I've seen. Oh, I've got a whole lot of likes for this transition and resilience in the face of kind of coronavirus, etc. So maybe we need to put something else in there as well.
I feel like since we do have folks from all over,
mm-hmm.
You're based in a city I love too, and I'm like, oh, but I think that's something that you can actually bring to another level and apply once we do one for mental well-being.
Ah, okay. Should we say mental resilience, and then we can apply that to the city as a whole?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay,
so,
I like that.
Thinking about it as we'll build a base sigil, and then you can also apply it to the city, and people can actually take that for their own places as well. So, think of any city and combining it with that symbol for the city.
Mm-hmm.
Would be a good way of doing it too.
It's almost like you can see my notes when I wrote down prosperity for NOLA in parentheses down here in my notes. I wrote down fleur de lis because
mm-hmm.
of course there's no greater New Orleans sigil than the fleur de lis. Right. And so, which by the way is not copyright the National Football League, despite what the commissioner might think. That was a funny moment where the NFL tried to tell us that the fleur de lis was copyright the NFL, and we had a brief history lesson with the National Football League. Like, that symbol's a little older than your organization, but that's capitalism for you, right? So, so I think we've passed, I suppose, here where we might have kind of skipped step 2 since this is, or step 1 since this is a communal sort of project, and we dove straight into the brainstorming.
Well, we're at a good stage, so let's consider it, we'll call it like a mental clarity sigil.
Brilliant. All right, mental clarity. I'll write it down.
I'm gonna get to the share screen.
Okay. This is when we try to engage the tech, folks, so cross your fingers. Oh, it looks like it's working.
So we're going to call it, for right now, the mental clarity sigil. It's not the sexiest name, but it works.
Brilliant.
All right. So we had compassion.
Mm-hmm. And resilience.
Resilience. Focus.
Focus, right?
Motivation.
Motivation. Acceptance. And compassion was already on there. What am I looking for? Mental well-being, focus, motivation, compassion. Oh, and I don't know a one word of it, but getting out of being stuck, unstuckness, right? Whatever that looks like. Yeah.
I have to put that in quotes.
Unstuckness. I'm glad that's becoming a word.
All right. So we got compassion, resilience, focus, motivation, acceptance, and stuckness. I feel like when we're talking about dealing with mental things here, there needs to be, I know it's sort of encompassed in compassion, but something a little bit deeper about kindness to self.
Yes. As somebody that again struggles with anxiety, that's a tough one to learn. So that's a great idea.
So it allows for healing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think so. We got through 7 things
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a good number.
It is a good number. Yeah. My happy spot's between 6 and 8.
There you go.
So let's put that over here. And oops. All right, that's going to stick there. So that's step 1 and step 2. We decided it's going to be the mental clarity sigil, unless we come up with a sexier name for it.
Be thinking of sexy names, y'all. Right.
And all right, and step 2 was brainstorm. So we're going to put compassion, resilience, focus, motivation, acceptance, unstuckness, and kindness of self that allows for healing. So now we're going to look at these things, and we're going to think about what kind of symbols or marks we might see with these things. And there is no necessarily wrong answer. I do recommend, especially when starting out, to try to stay away from getting pantomime isn't quite the right word, very literal in your drawings. When people are like, I'm going to make a peace sign for peace. It's like, right. Instead of a dollar sign for prosperity, I might use a diamond shape for like foundation and growth and that kind of thing.
Right.
So you can keep it really simple. It doesn't have to be like a picture show. Mm-hmm. So when we think about compassion, most people tend to think about heart.
Right.
So I put that in there. Oops. That is on blue. Why is it on blue? And let's make that line with a little smaller. Okay. So we have that. For resilience, what do you think for resilience?
Feel free to chime in, everybody. Already, Slade said, we're going to skip one down. He said focus could be an arrow, which certainly I think I agree with there.
Okay. You want to say like an upward arrow?
Oh, that's what do you think, Slade? Focus, is it an upward arrow or is it in any particular direction?
We got probably a 30-second delay on there.
Oh, that's true too. To me, it looks like I'm a big astrologer, so I immediately, you say arrow and I think, oh, it's a cardinal sign, right? So it's just that cardinal arrow. But yeah, some sort of arrow, whether we change its orientation at some point, right?
I tend to think of an eye as well.
Oh, for focus, sure.
It's a little.
Oh, so it says any direction. Yeah.
Any direction. Yeah. Any direction. It's a good direction, right?
Yeah, right. Jess says forward. I agree. I don't know that I would want it looking back.
Right.
Yeah, so not to the left, but maybe to the right or up. We've got a recommendation of sun for resilience. So we could put a sun. I always think about the half sun kind of. Again, it's a very Libran looking symbol.
And also, this is me drawing on my screen, so it's going to be I have a degree in art, and I look like a girl. So
it looks way better. I couldn't even figure out how to screen share on Zoom, so you're already ahead of me.
Getting better.
I love it. I want to touch on something. So Slade also suggested a couple down. He said unstuckness could be 2 wavy lines, and in the parentheses he says water. And I want to talk about that for a second, because certainly elemental associations are built in here, right? And you talk about that in the book, that there are both sort of, I don't know, universal is the right word, but universal symbols for the 4 elements, or even for the 5 elements, if you want to put spirit in as that last one. And those range from, again, this sort of high magic, alchemical, astrological sort of symbols for different things, all the way down to what we're talking about here, down to those entopic kind of wavy lines for water. And, I always think of a spiral as being a very airy sort of thing. Oh, she's going to hold. You got to remember you're screen sharing, so I can see you with your book, but if you hold it up to the page, I think I'm the only one that can see that right now.
You can't see? All right. I don't know how it works for the YouTubes, or not YouTube.
I think right now on Facebook, all they're seeing is the whiteboard with us kind of talking over it.
Neat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for I was just showing on here is on page 74 for those of you following along at home.
That's right.
Standard and modified, the triangles.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally prefer the modified, but that's like a whole other discussion to get into. But the wavy lines, you can do wavy lines, you can do droplets, any kind of other sort of movement. Almost, you can also think about arrows that, like, without going into Discordian.
Sure. Well, again, and I know you know this about me, but as a voodooist, of course, one of my big sort of spirits is Papa Legba, who is the spirit of the crossroads. And you more or less chalked out about half his symbol right there next to the wavy lines. You know, every veve, every symbol of his is a crossroads. What else we have? So we have a lot of people voting for either upward or forward arrow for our focus. So I think we're pointed in the right direction there. Laura says that motivation could be a lightning bolt, and I love that one personally. I think about being, you know, the bolt from the blue, right? Like that sudden inspiration. I think is fantastic. Barbara also suggested a flame for motivation, and again, we could talk. We could talk about the elemental associations of flame being attached to willpower and drive and creativity, and so certainly I think that's apropos. And then for acceptance, oh, Leslie, what a good idea that I'm glad I don't have to try to draw. Leslie says, for acceptance, welcoming hands. Now, I know your sigil artwork pretty well, Tempest, and I don't think I've ever seen welcoming hands there, but I understand what she's saying, that idea of an open hand. Oh, you can't see me either. I'm making hand gestures towards the screen like anybody can see me. I love this idea, though. Oh, that's great.
I hit the wrong thing.
Thank you, Control Z.
Yeah, Control Z. So you could do the chevrons, which are kind of speaking out. They can be towards each other, away from each other. You can also have a circle, because if we're all in the circle together,
we're accepted, right? I don't know why I love this idea of the chevrons. I think those are great.
Chevrons are the best.
Yeah, right.
They go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then kindness to self to allow for healing.
Well, we've already got a heart.
Yep, we could have another one.
Oh, that's true. I guess we're not limited to one.
Nope. Well, you can just say like, because sometimes we'll have elements that repeat. So if you're like, oh, look, heart shows up twice. It could also be a spirally heart, or I call it the open heart.
Ooh.
It can also be a crescent moon. As you think about with a crescent moon, it's sort of like a basket. It could be the waxing, it could be the waning. So you're letting things progress and go through cycles, because we don't know quite which way it's going. But it's also just, it's sort of protecting at the same time.
I love that open heart myself, but we're gonna let folks kind of chime in here. Let me make sure. Slade says a hand holding a heart for kindness to self. Ruby says a heart inside a circle for kindness to self. It's funny. Ruby is my wife. I should say, full disclosure there. And she and I are thinking the same things in different ways, which is kind of our standard way of being. Because I was looking at compassion and thinking compassion with sort of almost like a sunburst, like lines coming out of it every direction, to me would be a, love to others as a compassion. But we're all on the same. I'm seeing a lot of heart in hands. Now I'm Irish. That makes me think of the claddagh rings, right, and everything else. So, but certainly those are all good concepts. I'm just not sure, again, how deeply sort of elaborate we get. I know if it were me, it would be terrible. Already you've surpassed my drawing ability. Oh, Ruby says who's the heart inside. She likes the swirly heart, which I think is that middle one in kindness to self.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and Angela points out that the crescent moon positioned that way is also a smile, which is very relevant. And again, this is why I dig sigil magic, right? Because that is not an idea I would have had, but it is so clearly obvious once somebody points it out. Of course, Christina, our Irish fan, says, yeah, claddagh, playing to type there. And then Barbara said, kindness to self, a star symbolizing the whole body. That's a great one too. I know you're a big fan of putting stars in sigils.
I like stars.
They're great. They're fantastic. But that idea that star, the way you just sort of positioned it there, it does very much represent the human form, right? Head, 2 arms, 2 legs going down, etc. So these are all the great ideas. And if I have read the book correctly, what we now have to do is kind of drill down and figure out which ones of these kind of resonate, which ones feel right, which ones we want to incorporate into the final design. Am I right about that?
You are right.
All right.
So what I tend to do is I look at the list and I see what is repeating, or perhaps there's a particular motif that sticks out. And this one is already right now kind of developing in my head. So I'm thinking about that crossroads. I'm thinking about that circle in the center, right? And this whole focus. So I'm going to start actually with a circle. Let me find.
So excited to see this.
Okay, got a circle, and if we go. So this is also where I get to say, I know I said not to not to erase, but I'm dealing with the, oh, look, this already has an arrow in it. That's so cool.
Hey, look at that.
Okay, that's all right. Well, good to know that one. I want to pick this around. Can I move it? Yeah, that's probably putting in too much. So now I know that for next time. I like that they keep adding things on here. So that is exciting. So let's put our crossroads in. Come on. I feel like it's drunk. It's not me. Perfectionist. There we go. That's close enough. All right. We're starting off with that. And we have that bit of acceptance and those chevrons, right? But we also have so we're getting a little bit in here. We've got a little bit
of resilience. We've got that circle or acceptance, that repeating circle that we see a couple places.
We see a little bit of that. We've got a little bit of unstuckness in here. But I'm thinking of that focus. We also have a little bit of the eye coming through the center, but we'll come back to that. So we have an arrow here. So use chevron. Then we can do a chevron here. Then we can do a chevron here. But what if down here, you bring this down a little bit more? This is going to get a little janky, but let me put that heart.
Oh, the open heart. Oh, it's lovely.
All right.
Slade points out that our first circle with the crossroads through it is a target sign, which also is for him focus, right? So again, we're into that kind of, aiming at a goal.
So we're getting that in there. And so we can put that as compassion. We can do that as kindness of self. Motivation. So I like the idea of the lightning.
Me too.
How do we get this lightning in here? Where do we want to, what if we get it from?
So it says it looks like a veve, which is maybe the best compliment I think I could be given, right? It's entirely possible, Slade, that this is the same thinking that went into the veves God knows how many thousands of years ago. Because that's really all. I mean, I don't want to say that's all a veve is, because that's not true. But in its purest, a veve is a sigil that represents that particular spirit, that particular loa.
And many of those things are incorporating those entopic symbols, right? Those little cross hatches and the spirals and such. And I think one of my favorite experiences was a while back, a couple of years ago, was teaching at class, and there was a voodoo practitioner. She was from Haiti, And she said, you just explain the energy that is in veves and why they work the way they do. With the application of why these symbols come together, like suddenly it had new meaning for her.
Right.
And like, because this is the basic language. I mean, veve is used as a gateway, as a doorway, and it has a different history, but it still is a magical symbol that is tapping into our consciousness as well as working with those spirits and those entities.
Right.
So
well, and Tempest, I don't know if you know this, but there's also, and this is something I say on my tours, but there is a secret language that is built into veves as well. And here's the line I say on my tour. Unfortunately, I am not permitted to share with people outside the faith. So sorry, y'all, I'm not going to translate all the veves. But the idea is that if a voodoo queen, if a mambo makes a veve, as a practitioner, I can look at it and based on the symbols she chose to use, I can tell you typically where she's from, whether her training came from Louisiana or Haiti or Africa or wherever. I can usually tell you maybe how long she's been a mambo. There's all sorts of information that is packed into the positioning of certain symbols and the distance between these two dots. If they're close together, it means one thing, and if they're far away, it means something else. And so, to me, that's where a veve sort of, it starts to diverge from this idea of pure sigil magic, is that now it's also this form of communication, sort of practitioner to practitioner, that still bears all of the magical energy of the original veve itself. And so we're talking about personalization, which is, yes, obviously, as Voodoo Slade, you said the right thing right there. He says, how about a lightning bolt coming away from the circle in both bottom quadrants?
That's kind of
yeah, I think that, I was about to say, I think that's where you were headed.
So I wonder if is it going to come out of here?
While she's drawn that, folks, y'all are about a little more than $200 away from getting to decide where this beautiful sigil goes on my person.
And I will clean this up for you too. It's not
I appreciate that. I don't know. It depends on where they put it. If they say it's going on my ass, then I don't really care what it looks like, because nobody's going to see it, including me. I wouldn't even be able to see that one. So.
But your lovely wife will.
That's true. Yeah.
And then every time I see her,
right.
she's going to look at me like,
I don't know. She might appreciate it. I think this is going to be something we laugh about for a long while.
So we get that motivation, that lightning strike that's going through the center, and it's also focusing, therefore, rooted up and down at the same time.
I love that. I want to go back. Let me scroll back a little bit. Someone said, my dear friend Leslie, who I should point out still lives in Bloomington, in case we need, because again, there are only two types of people in Bloomington, Indiana. And those are people and people they know. That's it. So if you didn't know Leslie Tempest, she's in that other group. But Leslie says, put the heart inside the star body, which for whatever reason, again, I'm just used to listening to my intuition. That one kind of resonates with me. So if I'm understanding it, what she's saying is to draw the traditional star and then put a heart inside that pentagon in the middle.
So, like
that?
Right,
yeah, like that. Let us know if that's what you were referencing. My wife just said yes. Some of us would see it if it was on my ass. So
see,
I want to know who the us is in that. What do you mean us? Like you and the cats?
The cats are going to judge.
Yeah, well, my cats judge already, so that's nothing new.
What if?
Let's see. I'm
what
curious.
What if we
to see
put,
while
we're here, we put a little moon?
Oh, I love it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'd probably end up elongating this just a little bit to give it a little bit more room. And I think because of the scale that we're working at, it's going to be hard to put that star in there. But
if we brought it down, right?
we could ground it here, or nope.
Control Z.
Oh, there we go. Give me that. Thank you. Let's have it in the bay. Ooh. Do I like that? Do I not like that? It's kind of messy right now.
It's a little messy, but again, a wise person told me leave all those pin marks on there. So.
Yeah. Well.
It's harder when you're right. Like
if
you're scratching it out on paper, it's one thing. Slade says maybe put star above the top arrow. So here, I'm going to be very familiar for a moment. Yeah, like that. So I was about to say, I know that you have several sigils as tattoos. And that's not because you and I are necessarily close. They're in the book. There's a picture of two of your...
Not on my ass.
Yeah, of two of your tattoos. They're not on our ass. That's right. But both of those I've noticed are sort of longer than they are wide, right? They seem to me to be sort of vertically aligned as opposed to horizontally aligned. And so that's always kind of what I think about when I think about your sigil art in particular. And that makes me think about Slade's kind of putting the star above the top arrow. So it's almost like it's pointing towards the heavens. Which I like quite a bit.
Yeah, it gives it a little bit of direction, and I feel like what I just want to pop down here.
This is the design person in you speaking up. I can feel it.
Make that cleaner.
I might bring it down a little bit, and then put the. I see what you're doing, but put that star. I like. How do I explain this? In like, give me a little more length between the open heart and the. Asterisk, the 6-pointed star for better or worse.
Problem with the screen that's a touch screen. Is I don't want to like smear my whole hand on this thing.
Oh yeah,
I hear get all that on there too. I'm trying to do it with the pen. So
wonderful. We have everything. We've got our compassion. We've got a heart. I think that checks all the boxes, right?
So we got everything in there. We have some overlapping ideas. What we have going on here, so we have our focus, our target, and our circle, which is also for about acceptance, and the acceptance is going to migrate out past, right? For our crossroads here, we have, I gently crossed the lightning bolt at the top, because I kind of want to bring that from the upper quadrant down.
Brilliant. Yeah.
You know, and it's also, you think about lightnings, like was the argument, does lightning strike down or does it shoot up?
It depends on, you're right, depends on the bolt.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting kind of, also with motivation, moving it that way. So we have also acceptance in the chevrons meeting each other as well as spending out. Right. We have that crescent moon that gives us protection as well as healing and collecting, as well as that star for focus. And the asterisk just kind of gives us that additional space, because the asterisk is our wild card. This is the whatever else that you need to have mental clarity gets filled in there too.
Oh my gosh. So we've got a lot of comments coming in. Barbara says, and she's right, I love this, that the lightning bolts, if you look at it in a different way, it creates a peace sign. We've got peace in there as well, which is fantastic. And I will say that that's one of the things that every time I've seen a sigil done, it's very much this way. You start out with these ideas and you start to put them together, and then suddenly you see layers upon layers that you did not intend, and yet are there anyway. And I don't know what else to say except that is the essence of magic. Like that's how it works, right? So yeah, lightning bolts created a peace sign. Slade wants to know if you can put this on a black patch and sell it. I mean, the answer obviously is, well, of course. I know you've had some T-shirts with sigils and things done before. Are any of them available? And we'll get to where we can find all your stuff. But do you have any sigil work available on your site right now?
The patches and such I haven't gotten up on the new alchemy site, so I should get them up. I have the power sigil on there. The other ones I generally release as a for folks to use for nonprofit.
Right.
But this is a thing, like if you wanted to make a sticker out of this, we could talk about that.
Absolutely. Right. And it's not, I know that honestly, y'all, the important thing to me is the collaboration. The me getting tattooed is a fun way for y'all to throw money at our tour guides, right? This is me in a dunk tank, more or less. And so even though it's going on my person, I don't want to claim any sort of proprietary idea over this at all. This is a collaboration. It's for everybody that's on the feed. It's for everybody that sees the feed later and might need mental clarity, might need these 7 things. So by all means, yeah. And earlier, way up thread, somebody said we should just chalk this all over our city. And I think that was Leslie, who's in Bloomington. And I'll say, yes, absolutely, please chalk it all over Bloomington. If you could specifically chalk it in the alleyway next to the Buskirk Chumley Theater. That is my magic spot in Bloomington. That's where I used to go and look for all the cool graffiti. Here in New Orleans, y'all, nobody is still out. By all means, chalk this all over the French Quarter. It's the one time you can get away with it. Do not graffiti, mind you. Just use chalk. It'll wash away. Everything's good. But by all means, draw this far and wide. Any place you think mental clarity would help. Jeff says, this is cool enough that it should take on a life of its own. And I don't know how to break it to you, Jeff. That's the whole point of magic. It will take on a life of its own. Right. So definitely it will carry on farther than this little group. And again, I think to me, that's the point of magic. That's the idea, is to get beyond ourselves and kind of do something greater. So this is beautiful. As always, Tim, it's amazing to watch the work kind of develop live. I've seen a lot of finished products. I've never seen one develop in progress. So this is just amazing. Slade says he's in DC, that he'll chalk it up there. Which would be great. I hear 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue could use one just kind of maybe right in front of the gates. That would be awesome. Yeah, but I think I have a feeling this might be going up in a lot of different cities. I'm seeing Tennessee and Indiana and DC and Virginia and here in Louisiana. So we might have started a new movement here, which is, of course, the entire point when you're talking about positivity, is to get it as far as we can. I also think this one is particularly interesting to me, Tim, because I'm not sure I've ever seen one where every piece wasn't connected. So that free-floating star to me is a rarity. Now that just might be my experience. I don't know if that's something that happens. Slade says Capitol Hill. Yes, please put it in Capitol Hill too, Slade. That's we're if I don't see you on like NBC News Tonight here in a few. I'm going to wonder what happened, but it's just beautiful. Every last one of these I've seen you make is just amazing. And I think that speaks to and I don't mean this in a very, I was going to say it speaks to their power, but I don't mean that in that very sort of assertive, kind of silly patriarchal kind of way. I mean, like all of your symbols just resonate. So this is amazing. I am honored to get to have the finished version of this somewhere on my person. I don't believe, there have been a few more donations, but we're not at 500. So thankfully I get to decide where it goes, unless some folks make some pretty significant donations. Y'all are about $200 short. So if you really want it on my ass, it's going to cost you $200. Otherwise, I'm not sure where I'll put it, but certainly I'll take a picture of it and we'll post it and tag everybody once it's done. Certainly, and I know, Tempest, just because, again, I know your art, you'll clean this up a little bit, I'm sure. And so when we have the finished version of that, we'll put that on the page as well, so that everybody that was involved in its creation has access to it. Oh my goodness, we've got so many comments coming through. Christina Grant, you'll have to tell me what Balbriggan means. I don't know that name. I assume it's Irish, but that's as much knowledge as I have. Leslie says we'll chalk it in Vincennes, her hometown. Oh, that's beautiful. Ruth says that it feels like it brings groundedness into this sigil, with the circle of the self set between the starry sky and the asterisk earth, which are, at least those are her associations, but you can see with poetry like that why I married her. And then, yes, it really is. Oh, she's talking to Jeff. Jeff wants to know how much. I'm terrified to tell you this answer, Jeff. Jeff, if you throw $200 at it, we'll call it over the mark. I'm not sure we're quite there, but that'll be close enough. You can tell I'm really missing these crazy experiences because I'm eager to let somebody else tell me where to get this symbol tattooed on my person. Christina says Balbriggan is her hometown. So it's going up. Yeah, it's going up there. Yeah, it's a great idea. So somebody else said, if you chalk this symbol somewhere, please take a photograph of it. And then tag us. Tag me, tag New Orleans Secrets Tours, tag Tempest. We'll have all of those links in the comments. But yeah, absolutely. I would love to see this suddenly kind of proliferate far and wide. And then, of course, ideally, I think the goal of all sigils is to find one that is existing in the wild that you don't know where it came from. You know, when somebody else starts replicating it and putting it out, that's when you know you've really hit the home run with it. But by all means, please send us photos of this. So unless you've got more to add, Tempest, I would say that's our sigil. I
will definitely clean this up. I've saved the screenshot so we have all the elements, and I might make a blog post and tag everything in there too, so we can share the show on Pathos.
Yeah, so that's going to be my next. Just still plugging at the current total. It's it's at about 300, 290, 295. I'm a little behind, so somebody else is keeping track of the Venmo and then kind of texting me updates. So I know we're at about 200 off of that 500 total. So y'all either get to it or I'll just decide where I get to put it, and y'all can deal with it. We're going a little over time, but I want to say right now, if y'all have any questions for me or for Tempest, please throw them in right now. There's no need to donate anything to the Venmo. Just throw them into the comment thread. We'll try to answer what we can. I would be remiss, Tempest, if I did not cover what I've alluded to a few times, which is simply, and we'll kind of bring it around to where folks can support you. But I mentioned the latest thing, and I don't know, do you want to bring us back so that they can see our beautiful shining faces?
Let me stop share here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So your latest contribution, as far as I know, is the Liminal Spirits Oracle. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So the Liminal Spirits Oracle is a oracle deck, which is something different than a tarot deck. It's a deck of cards used for divination, but rather than the traditional sort of major and minor arcana, these are just ideas, archetypes, images that are special to you in your practice, and that you have depicted in these beautiful full color art pieces. And so I saw you just grab the deck. I'll be honest, I don't have mine yet. I'm waiting on Amazon. So by all means, if you want to flash us a few of them,
Sure.
Yeah, show us what they look like.
So it comes in a nice little magnetic box and a full color booklet.
Woo.
So there are 42 cards. There are 8 families of spirits. And but I said 42 cards, it's 5 in each family, plus 2 additional cards. And so look at the spirits of place, of trees, of herbs, of artifacts, which are the materials that we use to craft things with and use for ritual, such as metal and bone. There is the rites cycle from Weave the Liminal, which is roots in inspiration, time, environment, and star. You have things with wings.
Oh, you picked my favorite. You did that on purpose.
One that happened to be on top. It's
are
magic.
you kidding me? Oh, look at that. The corvids. Yep, the crows and ravens.
We have things like the furry creatures. Right?
Hares and rabbits.
Here is crystal. This is the artifacts. One of the outlier cards, number 42. Mushrooms. Because mushrooms don't fit anything else.
I'm not sure I'm allowed to talk about my experiences with mushrooms on this live feed.
Let's see, what else do we have? Belladonna is one of the herbs.
That's the one. You just had a reviewer say that card was like nightmare fuel, right?
Yeah, like,
I don't think there's anything particularly terrifying about that.
When Llewellyn asked me about what cards do you want to put on the cover, and what are my favorite cards? I'm like, well, the mushroom or the belladonna, and they're like, could you pick one that isn't sinister looking? And I'm like, nothing sinister about it.
There's nothing sinister about belladonna, right? That's nutty. Yes, it's a poisonous herb, but we're overlooking that. That's beside the point.
We have the Gateway, which is actually the first card, the Gateway to the Spirits.
Tempest, the next time you're in New Orleans, I don't know if you know this, but there is one of our oldest live oak trees is in Audubon Park. It's called the Tree of Life. And not far from the Tree of Life, I mean literally within a half block's walking distance, we have a labyrinth that someone built into the ground so that you can walk a traditional labyrinth and stand in the shadows of this giant oak tree. So next time you're in town, whether that's August or sometime else, whenever we're allowed to leave our homes again and can travel, by all means, I'm going to take you to a bunch of magic places. Ooh, I love that one. So what category is that one in?
This is roots, so it's part of rites.
Oh, nice.
From We the Liminal.
Yep.
And forest for place. So this is, to me, part of witchcraft is connecting with these spirits. Mm-hmm. And spirits would be the consciousness, if we're very animistic or pantheistic, or so many people arguing about animism right now, what word to use. It's like the essence of everything that we're connected to. Can we just call it that?
Yeah. Semantics are kind of unnecessary in my opinion.
Yeah. Feel it. If you feel it, you know it.
That's it.
Let's call it a day. And I really wanted people to start thinking about their practice, their craft, and connecting to the world around them, where they live, what animals are there, what entities are already present. And obviously there's only 42 cards. I could have made this deck twice as big, but then it would be really hard to shuffle.
That's true. So
these are, 42 is sort of, I'm a dork too, so it's that, answer to the universe.
The life, the universe, and everything. 42, yeah.
6 times 7.
Slade just said, it's funny. Now, I'm going to maybe ask your help to try to make me remember something. He just said, I call it the Force. I'm a geek. Slade, we're all geeks, so I call it the Force too. But again, in the last couple of days, I was just reading Sigil Witchery, and in the first couple chapters, you don't call it the Force, but you talk about the energy that connects all living things, and I mean basically you're talking about the Force, right? Like, I don't know what it was you called it, but Slade, there are references to the Force in Sigil Witchery, whether even Tempest knew it or not. There's some line that you almost could have put it in the mouth of a Jedi and you would have not noticed any difference. Like it just sounded like their philosophy. But yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about, is this interconnectivity between all, I don't even want to say living things. I want to say all. Everything. Yeah. I was going to say, is it sentient? No, it's more than sentient. Is it? No, it's everything. You're right. So we are all firm believers of the Force here on this webcast tonight, regardless of what name you want to call it. Yes, like just, he's not surprised by that. Yeah, trust me, neither are we.
So I was joking about the book I'm working on right now that I referenced Voltron. People are like,
yes!
Oh, yeah, like it's the best thing. Like, which one? Like, does it really matter?
I have in my notes, I didn't tell you this, but I do have Voltron written down in my interview notes, because I do want to say this too. Because I know sometimes, every once in a while, you get an Amazon review from what I assume is an OTO high Gardnerian ceremonial magic person that is like, I read this book on sigil magic thinking that I was going to learn lots of new techniques, and instead the author said angel penis twice, right? And they get all bent out of shape about that. But I love that. I love the fact that you can talk about high concepts in magical thinking and at the same time make Voltron references and these sort of silly off-color jokes that are relevant. It's not, you're not throwing them in just to be cute. They are literal good analogies. It's just that you decided to talk about random cartoons instead of high, ridiculous, esoteric concepts that 3 people have read about. And so, like, by all means, again, if you want this sort of, is it, and forget, is it insulting to call what you do hedge magic?
I don't really quite use it, but I'm not insulted by it. I mean,
Right.
just because that's another word, like, it's different than it meant in the 90s.
Right. Yeah, I mean, very much. Right.
And I'm like, wait, what does it mean now?
Right.
Kind of thing.
Right.
But
Well,
yeah,
my friend,
it's like we talked about earlier, making things accessible.
Mhm.
And I think people learn more when you don't try to make it into this is a big complicated thing. Like, it's not that complicated. It's actually very simple. We've just not been you didn't go to, school did not give you how to be in touch with yourself and the world around you and to be compassionate. It's more like fill in the blank and so.
Are you, I know you lived in this region for a while, so I'm going to take a shot in the dark and see if we can connect. Are you familiar with a gentleman named Phil Bricado?
Oh, up in Seattle.
Up in Seattle, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
I'm thinking down in the South?
No,
but Seder, yes.
Yeah. So Phil, up in Seattle, for those of y'all that are role-playing gamers of any kind, he was one of the original creators of the game Mage: The Ascension, which is a role-playing game all about magic users and different schools of thought, etc. And I think what we're calling hedge magic here, Phil would term as orphans, right? And orphans in his game were those magical practitioners that, again, just sort of made up their own system as they went along based on what was true to them. And that was always what I identified with when I played that game. And Phil's another Facebook friend from way back. So hopefully this might cross his path and he'll see that there are actual magical practitioners now making references to his fictional magical practitioners, which again, any of us would say are really one and the same. Like, what's the distinction between fiction and nonfiction anymore? Look at what we're all going through
currently.
This would be a terrible plot line of a movie, and yet we're all living it right now. So that's amazing. So I want to talk about one more thing. We're going over time, but liminality. We're talking about this liminal spirits oracle deck. One of your books is called Weave the Liminal. This is such an important concept to me that I could not do an episode about magic without digging into it a little bit. So I'm going to let you, since you've written on it more than I have, please hit the concept of liminality real quick for folks.
Really quick. So
real quick, yeah. Elevator pitching in. Here we go.
The space in between. It is the on the edge of perception, on the edge of understanding. It is the space between like dusk and dawn.
Different states of being,
times.
right.
Like, so people tend to liminal places. Like, liminal is a lot of different things. It's
right.
not just trance work or different things like that. It's all of these borderline, not quite here, not quite there, somewhere in between, which to me is like another essence of witchcraft, is that we are in the physical space, but we're also spiritual beings, and we are working with all of these different levels at the same time. So it's the weaving, it's the space between the threads.
Right. And that's why it's so important to me as a magician, as a magical thinking person, is that it's literally where the magic happens, is in those liminal spaces. So earlier I mentioned a particular alleyway. So even that, a connection, that's sort of off the beaten path between two roads, that's a liminal space. This notion of that twilight to me is my, that's my jam. After sunset, but before it's totally dark, that's when I do my work, is in that liminal space. Yeah, Slade says the shadows in between. You're absolutely right. Anything in between two states is liminal. That's the definition. And what's really interesting to me is that you obviously you speak so much about it and finding magic there. And as a paranormal investigator, as a guy interested in all sorts of esoterica, I can tell you that that's so often also where paranormal phenomena happen. We have a secondary set of evidence that supports this idea. So not even just that most alien abductions don't happen in big cities. They happen on highways between two cities, right? So that liminal space between one piece of civilization and the other. We talk about ghosts happening in places that typically are, I mean, obviously they exist in the modern world and yet call very strongly back to their history. So it's almost as if they exist in two times at one time, and that's a liminal space. But even to the people like the people we see most often that have paranormal experiences are those people who exist in liminal spaces. So folks like folks that live a transient lifestyle that do not have a permanent address, travelers. I hate to say it, but homeless people that exist outside, that are on those fringes of what is traditional and accepted. And you can see kind of the logic behind this, that because you're out there on the fringe of what most of us think of as the real world, it puts you in a unique perspective where you can see that other world going on. And I just, if you boil down magic to one word for me, it's that. It's the notion of it exists in those liminal spaces. It is the energy that connects these different realms of being. And so to see it repeated over and over and over again in your work, as I said to you on the notes, and as I've got written down here, I said I can expound about this forever. We can talk about this forever, about how the notion of being in between two worlds is the essence of magical practice. And so for those of you, and I'm gonna have to scroll way back on the comments, but I know some of y'all said you have trouble sort of engaging with your magical self or trying to figure out how to do things. And I think maybe that's my biggest and first piece of advice, is to find those sorts of spaces. And again, just like we're saying with the sigils, it doesn't have to be the liminal space that we define. It can be a liminal space that you define. If it's a hallway in between two rooms, go do your magic in that hallway. That's a liminal space. It would work. And so, like I said, I would be remiss if I didn't mention liminality while talking to you about magic, because I do think it is such a fundamental part of sort of both our paradigms, both our belief systems. And if you want to get into more of that, Slade said, oh, that's interesting. People who see ghosts. Yeah, absolutely. So when you look at paranormal phenomena, Slade, one of the things we see most often is that our eyewitness reports are typically people like truckers who exist in those in-between spaces. People who have fallen through, I mean, I hate to say it this bluntly, but people who have fallen through the cracks of society. So people like homeless people, like folks that are struggling with things like addiction or have had run-ins with the law. For whatever reason, that puts them in this sort of headspace where they have more accessibility to these sorts of phenomena. And I'm not saying that means if you want to see ghosts, go do crime. That's not the message at all. It's to find those places that aren't quite one thing or the other, and to learn to sit there in that space. Slade, bless his heart, he's just having a conversation. He says he sees ghosts and he has PTSD, so maybe that counts. And I would say absolutely, Slade. As another guy that deals with mental illness, yes. A lot of us that struggle with things like anxiety, PTSD, even really severe things like dissociative identity disorder. 1,000 years ago, they'd have called all those people shamans, wise men. like people that looked at the world with a different headspace. And so I would say absolutely PTSD qualifies for that. Oh, my sincere apologies. Slade points out Slade's a girl. So sorry about that, Slade. My mistake for making an assumption. Boy, that's the lesson you learn. But again, you're absolutely right. PTSD definitely counts as a liminal space. It is a space outside of what is normal. And so those sort of transitory, outside the norm experiences, I think they're so important for magic, and ghost hunting and everything else you want to talk about when you talk about the paranormal, the supernatural, the magical. And so if this resonates with you, if it's interesting to you, my strongest recommendation is, by all means, pick up Weave the Liminal. If you want to know more about like sort of how to do the sigil magic we did tonight for yourself on your own, Sigil Witchery is available. Which leads me, of course, to the question I ask everybody, Tempest, which is, how do all these folks find you after all is said and done? Where can we get all of these things from you?
Well, the easy place to get all the books is on my author website, which is lauratempestzakroff.com.
We'll put that in the comments, y'all.
Yep.
In case you have trouble spelling.
You can find me on Instagram. It's alchemy.arts, but it's the OWLKEYME because I'm a dork and I like owls.
No, it's brilliant. Owl-key-me, right? Owl-key-me.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and our logo even is a key with a fleur-de-lis built into it. So even our logo is a sigil, in case y'all hadn't figured that out by now. Right. So all these symbolisms are definitely there. But also, I want to recommend for people. We did an episode weeks back with Celeste Mott, who is an extremely accomplished tarot reader and probably knows more about oracle systems than I will ever hope to achieve. But we talked about tarot decks versus oracle decks, and everything we talked about earlier about high magic versus low magic. While I think tarot is probably the most well known, and I keep looking over to my right because I've got my Rider-Waite right here, Rider-Waite Smith, as we should say. That's the most well known, but it is again rooted in that very encyclopedic, very sort of systemic high magic concepts. There's a lot built into a tarot deck that I think without a lot of study, you may miss the forest for the trees. You may not know everything that's going on. So my advice for anybody that is getting started is to pick up an oracle deck. I started with Brian Froud's Farius Oracle. That was only because the Liminal Spirits Oracle did not exist yet when I was 20 years old. But I mean it. I mean, it's so much easier to relate to, rabbit or mushrooms than it is to relate to the Six of Swords and all of the different alchemical and astrological and sort of magical thinking that goes into that. So if you're looking for a good starter to get into this, and also if you happen to be a fan of just beautiful art on the first place, because we have not sung enough of your praises just as an artist, Tempest. You've done a few, and I'm very particular, I should note, about voodoo-related anything. As a practitioner here in New Orleans, especially, not to get into it, but as a white practitioner in New Orleans, I'm pretty sensitive and pretty aware of cultural appropriation and people that love the idea of voodoo but have never really researched it. And when I first dug into your art, I mean, we've got a Yemaya, we've got a sort of an image that to me is Marie Laveau. I don't know if that's who you were intending to embody when you put that kind of mambo artwork together. You've got one recently that to me, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's an image you just did of a woman sort of in front of a honeycomb. It's got a very bee motif. It's one of your new pieces. And to me, it screams Oshun. Oh, there it is. Look at that. Like just what we were hoping for.
Actually, this is a print on wood. I have a whole bunch of them that I'm going to be sending out in the next few days.
Yeah, you can get the G-Clays and the prints of this. But to me, I don't know what you were intending or where your headspace was. But when I look at this, it hollers Oshun at me. I mean, it has a very strong voodoo kind of connotation. And so, speaking as someone who is obviously again of white ethnicity in a Afro-Caribbean diasporic religion, talking to another person of white ethnicity, non-African ethnicity who dabbles in this stuff, I have nothing but good things to say about you. We've got, you approach it, and you can see it in your books too. We talked about this with Ken Gerhardt last week. So we had Ken, who's a Bigfoot hunter, who really digs into Native American legends and really tries to find the truth behind those, and says you have to start there and be really respectful of these cultures. The deftness with which you navigate different cultures and your approach to them, and how you manage to be referential and respectful without being appropriative is a rarity, I think, in this this sort of genre we find ourselves in. So anytime I see someone who is going out of their way to be respectful of all of these cultures that they find inspiration from, I want to highlight that and call it out. And Tempest, you are definitely on the short list of people that go out of their way to do that. So credit where it's due. I mean, that's almost more than anything else as important to me as anything we've talked about, and you've got it in your books in spades. So by all means, like, buy her art, buy her books, read her oracle deck. Everything that Tempest has put out, I think, is just a gift, and it's beautiful art, if nothing else, and certainly I think it's a lot more than just beautiful art. So we've posted. I'm following the comment thread, and I can see your homepage is linked there. Your Instagram is linked. The Square site that's got all your art is linked. So if you can't find Tempest stuff, you have nobody to blame but yourself, guys. It's all right there in black and white. Again, I promise when we get a finished image of the sigil, we'll put it up here so that everybody can follow back. And whenever I can get it inked, that might be a little down the road, since I'm pretty well planning not to leave my house until like August. As somebody I am slightly immunocompromised, so I'm a little more sensitive about going back out than everybody else is. I kind of want to do this thing. This is maybe my own magical practice, but again, we were supposed to have Calvin Von Crush on today to talk about occult collecting and Ouija boards and spirit trumpets and all sorts of things. But he is a tattoo artist, and I thought, how wonderful would it be if we made this sigil and then I somehow managed to get Calvin to be the guy that inked it onto my person. So we're going to try to arrange that, and if so, I'll let everybody know. If not, I'm going to go to my boys at Downtown Tattoos on Frenchman Street, which is where I've gotten all my other ink, and so I'm sure they'll be happy to put it on there. But if you've got any final questions for either of us, please throw them down into the comment thread. I'm going to scroll back down to the bottom. Ruby said, "Thank you, Tempest. This was so cool." This really was. It's so fun to have something practical. Like, this was almost a hands-on kind of workshop. I know you're doing more. Is there more of that coming, sort of via your site?
So I'm doing workshops on a weekly basis. I haven't set the dates for June yet, but I have Weave the Liminal. Actually, 2 sessions of Weave the Liminal next week and the following week. One's through me and one's through the Robin's Nest, which is up here in Massachusetts, but still online to help support that store. But I'll be on my website. I'll be posting the workshops, and you can sign up. I keep it small. It's only about 24 people, so that we can have interaction and questions and things like that. So there's this Weave Liminal, the art of ritual. There's also some sacred movement. So there's a little bit of everything. But right now I'm doing about one a week because I'm also trying to finish up a book.
Book number 8.
This is number 7.
Oh, this is 7. Okay. 6 that are published, 7 that's in the works. Gotcha.
So folks can find out about that. And I'll be doing some festivals this summer too. Temple Fest is going online. There's Witches Fest will be online. And I know there's more than that right now. I think Free Spirit Gathering, I haven't seen the details yet, but keep an eye out for that because it's good opportunities to sample a lot of different things too at once.
Well, again, you and I both have mutual friends in folks like Greg and Dana Newkirk we were talking about earlier, and I know they're getting ready to do another sort of supernatural paranormal convention that is all online. They've done one at the beginning of May. They're doing another one in June. This is how we survive. I mean, obviously tour guides are we're sunk until everything is reopened. And I know anybody that makes, the bulk of their living on lecture circuits, on convention circuits, I mean, we're all stuck. And so this is what we've kind of found in the meantime. And I'm very grateful that I kind of got to get in on the ground floor because of this pandemic. But there's so many good things happening online right now. So until we can all reconnect in person, this is really the next best thing. And Tempest, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your evening with me. This is amazing. I feel like I get to check this item off my I really want to be friends with this person list for the longest time, right? Because you and I, again, we've been acquainted for so long, but this is by far the longest conversation, real life, virtual text or otherwise, that we've ever gotten to have. And so it's just amazing to get to be a part of. So thank y'all so much. Again, folks, please support Tempest at all her sites. Again, if you want to throw anything to the tip jar, Jeff, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we did not hit our $500 goal. So that sigil is going to go wherever I want it, which, to be fair, means wherever my wife wants it. So if you do have suggestions, just send her a message and she'll collate all those. But other than that, if there's any last questions people have, we'll let you throw them into the comments. Tempest, I'm gonna throw it to you. Any last words you want to leave us with?
Oh, so thank you so much for having me, and everybody out there, just stay healthy. I hate to say grounded, but think about being in touch with yourself. Remember what connections are most important right now. That's how we're all going to get through this.
Mm-hmm.
Think about your person, your household, your community, and go out from there. Because that's how magic works. It starts at the root level, and we influence change from out there. So it's the perfect time to be working on that personal sphere and continue to expand out into the world. And we're going to get this into not going to normal, but a new kind of tomorrow.
Okay. And if we don't see it, I know you normally visit us in August, but
usually October is my preferred time.
I was about to say, I don't know why anybody comes here in August, but that's when some of the paranormal conventions are. So normally we see you there, but we'd love to get you back. I would say, tell me you're going to come back to New Orleans, but I already know you'll be back here sooner or later.
Oh, it's calling. I am having dreams. So I mean, it's in my blood. It's part of my family. So.
And she and I have already talked on the sort of end. Whenever you're back next, we want you to do book signings, or we'll do a specific liminal spirits tour of some kind where we take you to all the between places in New Orleans. We're going to do something amazing with you the next time you're here in person. But until then, guys, Laura Tempest Zakroff, everybody. Tempest, thank you so much. This has been an absolute blast. I'm so blessed to get to do this week after week after week. If we do a season 2, which I'm going to tell you won't happen until at least July, because I didn't even know I was going to do a season 1 until like 6 weeks ago. But will you come back? Tell us you'll come back, talk to us more about magic stuff.
Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah. Anytime.
Brilliant.
Happy to.
All right. Well, with that, folks, let me check. Slade wants to know, are you coming to NOLA in October? Slade, nobody knows if they're going to be in October.
No, nothing. I'd like to. There's a lot of things I'd like to do. We have to see.
I would love to have all of you back in October. I don't have enough room for everybody to crash on my couch, but if we can travel in October, we can travel. I will say, as a historian, as a guy that studies diseases in New Orleans and things like that, I am not the most optimistic about a second wave coming in the fall. I think that is something people should prepare for. I am not an epidemiologist. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a guy that studies history. And history says wave 2 might hit us in the fall, so October might be kind of up in the air. But no matter what, whenever it is safe for all of us to get together again, we are going to get together again. We have some ideas along those lines that we'll keep kind of secret for now. But keep an eye on this page, on Tempest's page, And certainly when we have more news from you, we're going to broadcast it to the wide world. So stay safe, everybody. Stay healthy. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, Tempest, it's been an honor. I mean, like, what a delight this was, and how overdue. I should have just gotten over my intimidation and contacted you back when you were a belly dancer. But we'll make up for 15 years now. So thanks so much, y'all. I'm going to say our farewells. And we'll catch you next week. Next week, we don't know what we're doing yet, but we'll be doing something. So by all means, log back in, and we'll have something for you. So until then, y'all, take care. Be healthy again. We love you. And we'll say goodbye for now.
Bye.
Cheers.